Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Candy Montgomery. Candy Montgomery was born on November 15, 1949, into a military family, which meant that she moved frequently throughout her childhood. Candy's bubbly personality made her stand out. At the age of 20, she met Pat Montgomery while they were both working at a tool and equipment company. In the 1970s, Pat was employed as an electrical engineer, while Candy worked as a secretary. Pat was hardworking and responsible, and his income provided stability and comfort in their lives. At first, their relationship faced many challenges. Candy found Pat unattractive. However, her views changed when she heard rumors about Pat's income from family friends, which made her want to give him a chance. In 1977, they decided to get married, and soon after, they moved to Wylie, Texas, a small town that is an ideal place to raise a family, offering a low crime rate and a quiet atmosphere. Candy, a devoted wife and mother, settled into her new home with Pat and their two children. She became active in social events, attended church, and sang in the local choir. Additionally, she also became a member of the Parents Committee and earned the respect of the community, with many people looking up to her. Overall, the Montgomery family had everything they needed for a comfortable life. They got along well with their neighbors and regularly attended the local Lucas Methodist Church. Many considered them a typical American family, with a daughter and a son who received plenty of love and support from their parents. Soon after moving in, Candy met a local school teacher named Betty Gore. They joined the church choir together, and their daughters quickly became close friends, often spending the night at each other's homes. Candy and Betty also became friends, occasionally attending school events and church together and frequently seeing each other on weekends. Gradually, Candy found her home life boring. She began to take an interest in Betty's husband, Alan Gore, whom she met at social events in town. Betty had met Alan when he was a teaching assistant at the university. Initially, Betty's family disapproved of their relationship, believing that Alan was too quiet and unsuitable for her. However, they fell in love and ignored their parents' concerns. They married in the 70s and later welcomed their first daughter before moving to Wylie. Alan was a hardworking family man, but his job often required him to leave town. Betty did not enjoy these absences. She preferred when Alan was home with her and their daughter. Whenever he was away, she had to manage the household and care for the child by herself. Although she kept in touch with Alan, she often expressed frustration about his business trips and her excessive exhaustion. One day, Betty called Alan's boss to ask him to stop sending Alan on business trips. This was impossible because he was an irreplaceable, first-class professional. Over time, Betty's frustration grew, leading her to frequently contact Alan's manager while he was away. Some speculated that her behavior suggested she might be suffering from postpartum depression. Instead of seeing Alan's job as an opportunity for financial stability and family happiness, Betty viewed it as a burden. She may have exaggerated her situation, especially since other women had dealt with similar problems more easily. Her situation may have been worsened by the fact that she had few friends. The relationship between Alan and his wife Betty became increasingly strained. Alan felt additional pressure from Betty, who could not understand the necessity of his business trips. These trips were essential to his high salary, which he could not afford to lose. Betty could be a difficult person, so Alan tried his best not to upset her as their marriage began to show signs of trouble. He started staying late at work more often, hoping to avoid arguments. Betty faced challenges even before she became pregnant. Likewise, Candy had her own struggles, and both of their marriages were deteriorating. When Alan and Candy met, they felt an immediate attraction and saw each other as an escape from their problems. However, they were both married, went to church, and lived in conservative communities, which made the idea of an affair terrifying for them. In October 1978, their situation changed dramatically. After a volleyball game in the church community, Candy expressed her feelings and proposed to Alan that they start a relationship. Alan, who was feeling frustrated with his own marriage, was intrigued by the suggestion but remained hesitant. A week later, during another volleyball game, Alan's interest in Candy increased significantly. He spent the entire week pondering her words. At this point, the tension between him and Betty was escalating. Seizing the opportunity, Candy reiterated her proposal, and this time Alan could not refuse. Meanwhile, Candy also felt anxious about the situation. She confided in her close friend, a church pastor, about her desire to have an affair, although she did not reveal who she would be involved with. Candy's friend tried to convince her not to go through with it, but Candy remained silent about her intentions. When Alan agreed to the relationship with Candy, they both made a list of pros and cons and established strict rules to follow. The main idea of their agreement was to keep their relationship purely physical. It seemed that Candy wanted to avoid emotional connection in order to maintain her relationship with her husband and simply have fun on the side. She convinced Alan to adhere to these rules. The rules stated that they would meet in the city, pay $23 cash for a room, and Alan would cover half the cost. Their meetings became frequent, always focused on intimacy. They could only meet for short periods and never spend the entire night together. A key point in their agreement was the requirement to avoid any emotional connection. They agreed that if either of them showed any feelings, they would end the relationship immediately. Candy found joy and excitement in this new relationship. However, her husband Pat was a good man, a loving father, and a reliable provider for the family. So she continued to maintain a stable relationship with him. Surprisingly, Alan's marriage also seemed to improve. Betty became less annoying, and Alan even began to see the positive aspects of his marriage. He started to spend more time at home with his family. During this time, an important event occurred. Betty became pregnant again, which brought genuine joy to both her and her husband. To celebrate Betty's pregnancy, Candy threw a party. Over time, the relationship between Candy and Alan began to change. They started to see each other less often. Alan also wanted to spend more time with his children and focused on saving his marriage with Betty. Alan began attending a church program aimed at restoring and strengthening marital relationships. After participating in the program, he realized that his relationship with Candy should end. On the way home, he avoided eye contact with Candy, making it clear that he did not want to continue their affair and had chosen to focus on his marriage. Alan even changed jobs to reduce his business trips. He ended the relationship and refused to see Candy. Candy felt deeply hurt by this decision. At first, she tried to suppress her feelings, but the emotional bond they had built over the year became too great. She was even more disappointed when Alan ended things. She felt used and discarded. After a while, Pat Montgomery discovered a postcard with a congratulatory message addressed to Candy. Pat realized that Candy had been involved in an affair. However, he was not angry with his wife. Instead, he blamed himself for the situation, believing that he had neglected her. At this point, only Betty was unaware of the recently ended love triangle. Pat decided to follow the same path that had helped Alan improve his marriage. He took Candy to a church program designed to strengthen the relationship between husband and wife. The program lasted about a year, and it seemed that Pat did not consider Candy's affair to be significant. Betty still did not know what had happened, but everything changed on Friday, June 13, 1980, at 10 a.m. Candy went to Betty's house to pick up a swimsuit for her eldest daughter. She then went home and continued her day as usual. At the same time, Alan was away on business. He tried calling Betty at home several times, but no one answered. This worried him, as it was unusual for her not to respond. She often waited for his phone call and sometimes called him several times an hour. Her sudden silence concerned him. Alan then asked the neighbors to check on her. Late in the evening, the neighbors returned and knocked on Alan's door to check, but there was no response. They searched the grounds with flashlights but found nothing unusual outside. When they entered the unlocked house, everything seemed normal. In the kitchen, they noticed 2 empty glasses on the table. However, when they called out, no one answered except for the sound of a child crying from the basement. When they went down to the basement, they found Betty dead. Betty's body was so badly disfigured that it was unrecognizable. The neighbors quickly called the police and informed Alan of their discovery. Forensic experts determined that Betty had suffered 41 axe wounds. The murder weapon was found just a meter away from her. Betty's face was so badly damaged that the only way to identify her was through dental records. One of her hands, which may have been used to cover her face during the attack, was nearly severed. Most of her injuries occurred after her death. The violent nature of the attack suggested that the attacker knew Betty well. There was no sign of robbery or abuse. It appeared to be a personally motivated attack. Unfortunately, DNA evidence was of no help to the police at the time. The murder shocked the entire city, which had never experienced a homicide before. People were scared, worried that a dangerous criminal might be lurking in their neighborhood. Residents were eager to help the police catch the brutal killer, but the investigation was just beginning. At the time of the investigation, advanced technologies such as DNA testing, surveillance cameras, and cell phone tracking had not yet been developed. The police focused on Betty's surroundings, examining her relationships with her family and neighbors, but everyone had a solid alibi. Upon hearing of the tragedy, Alan immediately called Candy, knowing that his eldest daughter was staying at her house overnight. He checked to make sure the child was safe and shared the sad news about his wife. Candy feigned shock upon hearing the news of Betty's death. Forensic experts were working at Betty's house, trying to collect any evidence to link the events. They later discovered a fingerprint on the refrigerator door, along with bloodstains that clearly showed a shoe print. The police focused on Alan as the prime suspect, since it is not uncommon for a husband to kill his wife. It was believed that the murder may have occurred in a fit of rage. Meanwhile, the police arrived at Candy's house. She remained completely calm. However, upon hearing that the police had discovered a shoe print in Betty's house, she quickly tore it into small pieces and threw it in a trash can a few blocks away. When Alan returned home, he was questioned by the police. Alan was asked about possible infidelity. He maintained that he was faithful to his wife and insisted that she could not have had an affair. After questioning, he was released, but the next day he returned to the police to confess to the lies regarding the infidelity, which he said troubled him. The police discovered that there was, in fact, an affair involving Betty's best friend Candy. Furthermore, he mentioned that he had decided to end the relationship himself, which could have been a motive, to have visited Betty on the day of the murder to pick up a swimsuit. Police discovered that she was the last person known to have seen Betty alive. Additionally, the time of Candy's visit coincided with the estimated time of Betty's death. Meanwhile, Alan had a solid alibi, as he was out of town on business during the incident. As a result, Candy became the prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. She admitted to going to Betty's house that morning, where they chatted and had coffee together. According to Candy, nothing unusual happened, and she left with her swimsuit about 30 minutes later. She acknowledged having had an affair, but stated that the relationship had ended long ago. Both Candy and Alan insisted that Betty did not know about the affair. The experienced police suspected that Candy was hiding important information. They offered her a lie detector test, but she refused, apparently terrified, which only heightened the police's suspicions. The fingerprints collected at the crime scene matched Candy's. On June 26, Candy was arrested for murder, but her husband posted a $100,000 bail, allowing her to be released the following day. Case documents were collected and reviewed over the next week, during which the attorney began to formulate a defense strategy, knowing that a trial was inevitable. The entire city was shocked to learn of the killer's identity, but many refused to believe it, and even helped her husband raise money for bail. No one could have imagined Candy wielding an axe and attacking her best friend, Betty. Although she initially denied any involvement in Betty's death, she later confessed to the attack on the advice of her attorney. The confession came under circumstances that, under state law, likely allowed her to avoid punishment. The case was widely reported in the media. According to the prosecutor's office, Candy stated that she had visited Betty to pick up a swimsuit for her daughter. During their conversation, Candy suddenly revealed that she had slept with Betty's husband. Betty then went down to the basement to get some things, and Candy followed her. While in the basement, a struggle broke out between them, during which Betty brandished a weapon to attack Candy. Candy suffered multiple cuts on her hands while trying to defend herself until Betty finally struck her in the head. Candy believed she had sustained severe scalp injuries and experienced temporary amnesia. She claimed to have suffered several other injuries as well, but somehow managed to retrieve the axe. She did not remember what happened next, and only regained consciousness after washing off the blood in the bathroom. To avoid facing the consequences of her actions, she changed into Betty's clothes and chose not to go back to the basement. The prosecutor's office found this argument hard to believe because of the violence involved in the case. The extent of Betty's injuries suggested that this was a serious crime and not self-defense against an aggressive friend. The prosecution argued that it was a premeditated murder motivated by jealousy. Furthermore, there were very few injuries on Candy's body. Only a scratch on her toe was noted. The trial began on October 20, 1980, and attracted considerable media attention, filling the courtroom with over 200 people. The defense presented several witnesses, including pastors and church members, who testified that Candy was a loving mother, wife, and good person. Candy testified confidently and answered every question without hesitation or confusion. The jury called an independent psychiatrist from Houston, who used hypnosis during the evaluation. He supported the defense's argument, stating that she had unconsciously been in a rage due to a head injury related to a childhood incident. The psychiatrist argued that in her rage, Candy unconsciously recalled a traumatic memory from her childhood, which led to her violent emotional reaction. The independent experts concluded that Candy had unintentionally killed Betty. Alan, Betty's husband, testified in Candy's defense during the trial. Alan mentioned that in the last days of Betty's life, her mental health had declined. She was struggling with postpartum depression and was irritable. Betty believed that her husband had been unfaithful, but he denied it, although he had ended the affair. Candy's attorney used this testimony to argue that Betty was in a state of mental instability, driven by her husband's supposed infidelity, which led her to try to harm Candy. The jury found these arguments persuasive. After deliberating for over 3 hours, the jury found Candy Montgomery not guilty. Betty's family and friends were shocked and shouted angry comments at Candy as she left. This was her attorney's first criminal case, and the outcome was a surprising victory for the defense. Alan later remarried, but his second marriage ended quickly. Candy and Pat, her husband, felt compelled to leave the city due to pressure from the local community, and they moved to Georgia with their children to start over. Over the years, the couple tried to save their relationship, but eventually they separated. After the split, Candy chose to return to her maiden name to avoid public scrutiny. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Autumn Taggart. In 2018, Autumn Taggart was a single mother living in Windsor, a city near the US-Canada border. She resided about a mile from the border that separates Michigan, USA, from Ontario, Canada, with her 9-year-old son, Gavin. On Saturday, June 9, 2018, Autumn, Gavin, and Chris Sherwin, Gavin's father and his Autumn's ex-husband, spent the afternoon together. Despite their breakup, Autumn and Chris had remained on friendly terms, prioritizing their co-parenting of Gavin to minimize the negative effects of their divorce. By the late afternoon, they went grocery shopping together. Afterward, which Chris drove Autumn and Gavin to the building where they lived on the 3rd floor. After saying goodbye, Chris returned home. Before bed, Gavin played video games with his mother. He had no idea later that night would turn into a terrifying nightmare. Later that night, while it was still dark, Gavin woke up to a strange noise. He opened his eyes to find an unfamiliar man standing next to his bed. The stranger instructed Gavin to close his eyes and go back to sleep. Then he left Gavin's room. Gavin heard his mother scream a minute later, and the sound sent a chill down his spine, filling him with a sense of dread. A few minutes passed, and eerie silence filled the air. His mother's screams had stopped, and he eventually drifted off to sleep. In the morning, Gavin got out of bed and rushed to his mom's room. The room was in disarray, with everything smashed and destroyed. His mom, Autumn, was lying motionless on the bed. At first, Gavin thought his mother was just sleeping, but the blood on her nose made it clear something was seriously wrong. As the devastating truth set in, that his mom had passed away, it shocked him. Gavin didn't want to believe it was true. Desperate to escape the pain, Gavin spent the morning playing video games and watching YouTube, trying to distract himself from the truth. However, as the day wore on, the emotions became too much to bear. In the afternoon, Gavin broke down in tears and knew he had to tell someone what had happened. Gathering his courage, Gavin went back to his mom's room, grabbed her phone, and texted his dad, Chris, on Messenger. With shaking hands, he typed out a message, telling his dad that Autumn wouldn't wake up. As soon as Chris received the message, he and his girlfriend rushed to Gavin's house. After parking, Chris exited his car and saw his son standing behind a sliding glass door on the 3rd floor of the building. Since Chris didn't have an electronic key to enter, Gavin came downstairs to let him in. Chris then asked his son to stay with his girlfriend while he checked on Autumn, who was not waking up. Upon entering the apartment and bedroom, Chris found Autumn pale and bruised, with a bloody nose. He immediately called 911, and the police and ambulance responded to the scene. However, the paramedics declared Autumn dead due to the severity of her injuries and evidence of a struggle in the bedroom, ruling out the possibility of an accident. As investigators searched the apartment for evidence, a specialist interviewed Gavin to gather more information. The boy revealed that a stranger had entered their house and told him to go back to sleep. He reported hearing his mother's screams, which eventually stopped. Gavin also described the man he saw in his room, recalling that the man was of average height, white, and had disheveled hair, appearing as though he had just woken up. The boy's testimony described the suspect as skinny but not extremely so. A forensic examination after Autumn's death concluded she died from strangulation, with visible signs of a prior beating and genital injuries. Male DNA was also found on Autumn's body. The police investigated to answer 3 main questions. How did the perpetrator gain entry to the apartment? What was the motive behind the crime? And most crucially, the identity of the suspect. The police quickly ruled out the possibility that the killer was a tenant in the building. Since Gavin was familiar with all his neighbors, and the man he saw on the night of the crime was a stranger to him, this led them to look elsewhere for a suspect. To enter Autumn's apartment, the perpetrator needed more than just an electronic key to the building. However, there were no signs of forced entry on the door leading to the apartment. This initially led investigators to consider 2 possibilities. Autumn might have let the perpetrator in herself or forgotten to lock the door. Investigations later revealed that neither assumption was correct. The perpetrator had instead climbed to the third floor, starting from the balcony on the second floor, then accessing the apartment Autumn's as the door was open. Along with a DNA sample, the police found fingerprints at the scene and sought to identify the owner. It was 12 days after the body was discovered that the police released the victim's identity in hopes of gathering tips from the public. Anyone with potential information about the case was asked to contact detectives. On the night of the crime, a witness reported seeing a new black SUV, believed to be a Honda Pilot, in the parking lot next to the building. The SUV was present until around 6 a.m. Detectives suspected that the SUV's owner might be connected to Autumn's death, speculating that the perpetrator could have used the vehicle's roof as a stepping point to access the balcony. This building had distinctive protrusions at its corners that could have aided the perpetrator in climbing from the second floor to the third. During their investigation, police analyzed mobile phone activity around Autumn's residence on the night of the incident. The nighttime occurrence actually simplified their task, as most people were asleep, resulting in fewer active phone numbers in the area. Detectives discovered that one of the phone numbers belonged to Autumn's neighbor, Michelle. Although Michelle lived in the same building as Autumn, she said in an interview with police that she knew nothing. However, phone records showed that not only was Michelle on the phone while in her apartment, but she also traveled throughout the city multiple times. Additionally, she had turned off her phone around the time of the incident. While the phone's location indicated she was either in or near her apartment at the time, the exact location was difficult to pinpoint due to the inherent margin of error in location tracking. Detectives went back to question Michelle again, sensing she was hiding something about the case. At first, she denied knowing or hearing anything, but when police warned her that withholding information could make her an accomplice, she opened up. Michelle revealed that around 2 a.m., a man named Jitesh Bogle contacted her and her boyfriend, seeking to buy an illicit substance and was interested in hiring an escort girl. Michelle and her boyfriend agreed to meet Jitesh. They first stopped at an ATM, where Jitesh withdrew cash. Then, Jitesh purchased some of the substance from Michelle and her boyfriend, who were its dealers. However, Jitesh asked them to sell him more. Michelle instructed Jitesh to drive to the parking lot near her building. Once they arrived at the building, the three of them took illicit substances. Then, Michelle and her boyfriend decided to steal the remaining drugs and escape, leaving Jitesh behind. Remarkably, before running away, Michelle hid a bag of this addictive substance in her genital area. Although the details of how she did this are not provided, it is an important fact that will become relevant later. According to Michelle, she and her boyfriend grabbed the substance and some of Jitesh's cash and ran to the building's entrance. They then entered their apartment and locked themselves in, remaining quiet and keeping the lights off. Since Jitesh didn't have an electronic key, he was unable to enter the building. He also refrained from shouting or honking his car horn, fearing someone would alert the police. From their apartment window, Michelle and her boyfriend observed shoe marks on the roof of Jitesh's car. Jitesh drove away around 6 a.m. Investigators hypothesized that Jitesh had attempted to sneak into the building to retrieve the stolen substance and money. However, not knowing Michelle's apartment, he likely entered Autumn's apartment by mistake. The police now have the phone number and photo of suspect Jitesh. The image was captured from a bank security camera, where Jitesh had withdrawn cash to purchase the substance, and an ATM camera also took his picture. After verifying the phone number, investigators discovered that he was a 27-year-old Canadian citizen. He worked as a car development engineer in Warren, Michigan, and owned a black Honda Pilot SUV. Initially, Jitesh regularly commuted to Windsor, Canada, by crossing the river via bridge or tunnel. However, authorities tracked his movements, revealing he had left Canada on the morning of June 10th, the day Autumn died, and he has not returned to the country since. Following the release of information about a black SUV at Autumn's house, Jitesh sold his vehicle. The Canadian police collaborated with their American counterparts, learning that Jitesh planned to relocate from Michigan to Washington State, where his parents resided in Kent. After relinquishing his job and left Canada, Jitesh's actions raised suspicions. Nevertheless, the police required concrete evidence to make an arrest and facilitate his extradition to Canada. To investigate Autumn's death, the Windsor police sought assistance from the U.S. National Security Agency to track Jitesh's movements. A DNA sample found on Autumn's body likely belonged to the suspect, Jitesh, but a confirmed match was needed. Jitesh, attempting to evade detection, made several attempts to disguise himself. He shaved his beard and wore blue contact lenses to alter his appearance. However, Jitesh eventually made a mistake. During a visit to a bar in Warren, he left behind a used glass, which U.S. agents seized to obtain his DNA. The comparison of Jitesh's DNA to the DNA on Autumn's body took time, but the outcome was predictable. The test confirmed that the DNA on Autumn's body belonged to Jitesh. On August 17, 2018, over 2 months after Autumn's death, Jitesh was arrested at his parents' residence in Kent, Washington. The arrest caught Jitesh off guard, as he seemed to believe he had evaded detection. U.S. authorities have initiated the process of extraditing Jitesh to his home country. In the extradition documents, the prosecutor stated that Jitesh is a threat to society, at risk of fleeing, and unpredictable. Following this development, Canadian police charged Jitesh with the murder of Autumn Taggart. Due to national restrictions, it was not until November 2021 that Jitesh's trial took place. The trial was held across 3 separate courtrooms. In the main courtroom were the judge, the prosecutor, the jury, Jitesh, and Jitesh's defense team, all present for the proceedings. 2 additional courtrooms were equipped with large screens to broadcast the trial to Autumn's family members and other attendees. During the trial, Jitesh pleaded not guilty to the first-degree murder charge. He claimed that Autumn's death was accidental. According to Jitesh, on the night in question, Michelle and her boyfriend stole money and an illicit substance from him. The incident upset Jitesh, prompting him to exit his vehicle and pursue Michelle. However, due to his intoxication from consuming a substantial amount of alcohol and substances, Jitesh's memory of that night's incident is very limited. He recalled entering Autumn's apartment after climbing onto the balcony. However, he claimed he mistook her for Michelle, someone he believed had previously robbed him, on he finding Autumn asleep in her bed. Autumn woke up and screamed, but Jitesh immediately ordered her to be quiet. However, she continued to scream, and in an attempt to silence her, he covered her mouth with his hand. Unfortunately, this action caused Autumn to suffocate. Jitesh later claimed that he did not realize he had caused Autumn death until her screaming stopped. He attempted to revive her with CPR, but it was unsuccessful. Additionally, Jitesh did not recall how Autumn sustained genital injuries or how he left her apartment. His lawyers argued that the crime was not premeditated, citing Jitesh's extreme intoxication and inability to control his actions as the reason. According to them, his actions, including covering Autumn's mouth to silence her, were not a deliberate to take her life. According to defense attorney Peter Thorning, Jitesh was too drunk to fully understand the consequences of his actions. Peter emphasized that Jitesh's behavior could be attributed to his intoxication, and that the tragic outcome was unintentional, stating, "Sometimes terrible things happen without us intending the result, and that is what happened in this case." The lawyers pointed out a crucial aspect of the case. There was no evidence that Jitesh had engaged in intercourse with Autumn. This detail is significant, as it could impact Jitesh's sentence. Although Jitesh's DNA was found on Autumn's body, it was not seminal fluid. The lawyers argued that the appearance Jitesh's DNA could be the result of cross-contamination, where DNA is transferred from one surface to another. This could have occurred through the gloves of a forensic expert, for example. Jitesha's lawyers attempted to prove that John Lort, who worked in the forensic unit during the investigation, mishandled evidence and accidentally transferred their Jitesha's DNA to Autumn's body. John Lort's responsibilities included photographing the crime scene and collecting evidence that came into direct contact with Autumn. The defense lawyer, Peter Thorning, suggested that John Lort may have caused cross-contamination by rotating the body on the bed sheet, which was seized as evidence. This action could have resulted in the transfer of DNA or fluids between the body and the sheet. During cross-examination, John Lort testified. Peter Thorning asked John Lort if he had received proper training to work as a forensic identification expert. John Lort replied that he had taken precautions to prevent cross-contamination by changing gloves between handling each piece of evidence and using his camera to take photographs. John Lort searched Autumn's room for fluids such as urine, saliva, and semen. The reason for this search is that the likelihood of a sexual assault is higher when the victim is female. During the trial, John Lort testified that he found no indication of a sexual assault based on his search for fluids. John Lort stated in court that his investigation did not reveal any signs of a sexual assault on or around Autumn's body. He also did not find any evidence of a struggle. According to John Lort, a typical struggle usually leaves behind signs such as forced entry, tampered locks, or blood spatter, but none of these indicators were found at the crime scene. In contrast, the prosecutor offered a different perspective. Referencing a past instance where Michelle hid a substance in her genital area, the prosecutor suggested that the defendant knew about this and searched Autumn's body in the same area. He claimed that even though Jitesh used his hand, the act was still a form of assault. The prosecutor expressed strong disapproval of Jitesh's actions. During questioning by the prosecutor, Jitesh was asked why he did not immediately call 911 when Autumn stopped breathing. Jitesh responded, "He disagree," although the context of this response is unclear. Jitesh expressed his fear that the police would not believe him if he reported what happened. During his testimony, Jitesh admitted that he had limited recollection of the incident that transpired in Autumn's room. However, he specifically remembered performing CPR on Autumn after she stopped screaming, which involved administering 15 chest compressions and 3 rescue breaths. The prosecutor questioned Jitesh's claim that the strangulation of Autumn was accidental. The prosecutor argued that if the defendant's intention was simply to silence Autumn, he could have achieved this by covering her mouth, rather than also closing her nose. This deliberate action, the prosecutor suggested, indicates that the defendant understood the consequences of his actions. Autumn's son, Gavin, also provided testimony during the trial. Gavin's testimony was given in a separate room from the main courtroom, accompanied by a support worker. Gavin said someone came into his room and spoke to him, but he doesn't remember what they said. The person stood close to him, but they didn't touch him. After they left, Gavin heard his mother screaming in the distance. This part of the experience felt like a dream, but eventually it stopped and he fell asleep again. And he woke up in the morning. The next morning, Gavin went to his mother's room and found it in disarray. Everything was knocked over, broken, or destroyed. At first, he thought his mother was just sleeping, but then Gavin noticed blood on her nose and realized that she was actually dead. He was in shock and couldn't process what he was seeing. Despite feeling overwhelmed, Gavin tried to cope with the situation by carrying on with his day as usual. Gavin recalls spending part of that day playing games and watching YouTube videos. It wasn't until later in the day, June 10, 2018, that he finally mustered the courage to send a message to his father using his mother's phone. He couldn't keep what had happened to myself any longer and needed to tell someone. Chris Sherwin, Autumn Taggart's ex-husband and the father of Gavin, testified about his last contact with her. He received a text message from her around 12:30 a.m. on June 10. When he sent another text message the next morning, there was no response. This is when he began to worry. Later, he received a text message from Autumn's phone, which turned out to be from their son. A copy of these text messages was presented in court for the jury to examine. On December 1, 2021, a 12-member jury found Jitesh Bogle of first-degree murder, but they did not find sufficient evidence that he had intercourse with Autumn. On January 5, 2022, the court sentenced Jitesh Bogle to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Jitesh appeared in jail via video, dressed in an orange jumpsuit and wearing a black mask. He sat with his back against a wall, away from the camera. When the judge asked if he wanted to say anything, he expressed his feelings of sorrow and remorse. Jitesh said, he find it difficult to put into words the sorrow and remorse his feel. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Tara Lynn Grant. Tara Lynn Grant was born on June 22, 1972 in Michigan. She grew up on a farm with her parents and older sister. During her childhood, Tara enjoyed doing outdoor activities such as horseback riding and helping her family take care of farm animals. She was also very active in school sports, cheerleading, playing basketball and playing music in the school band. After completing high school, Tara decided to attend the University of Michigan. It was here that she met her boyfriend Steven and married him after graduating. Tara, after graduating, got a good job at a large international company. Meanwhile, Steven had been involved in politics as an assistant to a state senator. However, when the senator retired, Steven lost his job. Therefore, he decided to work at his father's small tool shop. After 4 years of marriage, Tara and Steven had a daughter, followed by a son a few years later. When their second child was born, they bought a new home in Monmouth County, Michigan, just outside of Detroit. Tara was successful in her career, but due to the nature of her work, she often traveled to different states and countries, leaving her with only weekends to spend with her family. As a result, Steven had to take on most of the responsibility for the children. His father's store job and the children's care were difficult for him. So they decided to hire a full-time nanny to help ease the burden. After a short time, they found the right person. They hired a young German woman who quickly bonded with their children and took on most of the childcare. Because of her work, Tara only came home on weekends, which led to more frequent arguments between them. Tara expected that after her next promotion, she would be able to adjust her schedule to spend more time at home with her family, but when she was promoted, she traveled for work almost every day. This continued until February 14, 2007. When something unexpected happened. On Valentine's Day, Steven reported to the police that Tara had been out of contact for 5 days. This was unusual because Tara was in constant contact with her family, especially when children were involved. Steven recounted the incident as follows. On the evening of February 9th, Tara returned home from a business trip and said she had to leave earlier than expected, staying home for only 1 day. This led to an argument, and Tara began packing her things. As she left the house, she told the driver of a dark-colored car, "I'll be waiting down the street." From then on, Tara was out of contact and did not return any calls. The police wondered why Steven waited 5 days to report the incident. Steven explained that he was not worried at first because he thought Tara had just left for work early as planned and had not contacted her because they had just had an argument. However, he became concerned when Tara did not contact her family for an extended period of time. Normally, when she was on a business trip, she would call her 2 young children, but this time she did not contact them. Furthermore, Tara's boss called Steven on Monday to say that she had not shown up for a meeting. This made him even more worried, and he was sure that Tara was missing. Steven called Tara's parents and told them about her lack of contact with home. However, the parents thought that Tara just needed time off after an argument with Steven. Previously, Tara had told her parents that her relationship with Stephen was having difficulties due to work, and they argued frequently. Therefore, her relatives thought that Tara just wanted to temporarily leave and would return home when she had stabilized. As time passed and Tara still did not appear, and she did not answer any calls, Stephen began to worry about her safety. He decided to contact the police for help. During the interrogation, the police noticed some suspicious scratches on Stephen. They asked if the scratches were related to the argument with Tara. But Stephen denied it. He explained that he often got injured while working at his father's store. After the interview, the police said they needed to search Stephen's home, and he agreed. When they arrived, the police discovered that all of Tara's belongings were missing from the home, including her papers and wallet, along with her suitcase. Stephen also gave them access to Tara's personal computer. The police checked it and found that there had been no bank transactions in the days after she disappeared. The police were surprised because Tara would have needed to pay for expenses if she had gone somewhere, such as buying a plane ticket or booking a hotel room. During the search of the home, the police found no signs of Tara's whereabouts after she disappeared. There was no evidence or clues. Therefore, the police decided to focus on determining what she had been doing and where she had been on February 9th. The area they live in is considered one of the safest in the country, and the local police department has little experience investigating similar disappearances. The police ask Stephen to take a lie detector test, but he refuses. Stephen insists that he would never harm his wife and becomes very emotional. The police then leave his home and consider their next steps. However, the next morning, Stephen contacts the police again and says he is willing to cooperate. However, a short time later, Stephen's lawyer contacts the police and says he has advised his agent not to cooperate with the police. Other than following the usual practice in such cases, they are unable to find any other leads. During the investigation, Tara's family, friends, and colleagues said they had not heard from her since February 9th and did not know where she might be. Additionally, her bank account had not recorded any significant transactions, although she needed to make some basic purchases. Police began to question Stephen and discovered that his driver's license had been revoked. However, Stephen continued to drive despite the ban. Police used this to arrest Stephen for driving without a license. After his arrest, Stephen claimed that the police were considering him a prime suspect in his wife's disappearance and refused to answer any questions. With the assistance of his lawyer, Stephen was released on bail and returned home. Police continued to investigate and requested Tara's cell phone records to gather more evidence. On the day Tara went missing, she made one last call. It was from the airport, in which she told Stephen that she would be home soon. Stephen then called her repeatedly, but all the calls went to voicemail. The police listened to these recordings and found that Stephen asked Tara to answer or call back. He claimed that Tara did not care about the children and asked her to come home for the children. However, Tara's cell phone was turned off and was last connected to a cell tower near her home on the evening of her disappearance. It is worth noting that the police did not find any incoming calls to Tara at that time, although Stephen said that someone had called her before she left the house and said that the person would be waiting for her on the street. Stephen was really worried about his wife and at the same time angry at Tara's actions of abandoning their children. Although the police were investigating him, they could not find any new traces. Stephen still refused to cooperate with the police, accusing them of wasting time suspecting him instead of looking for Tara. During this time, Stephen actively appeared in the media. Tara's mysterious disappearance attracted a lot of attention from many people, and in front of the camera, Stephen begged her to return home safely. When the company that Stephen and Tara hired the nanny learned about the case, they decided to send the nanny back to Germany. Before leaving, the nanny reported to the police about her working hours at their house. The nanny said that on the evening Tara came home, she went to a bar with her friends. When the nanny returned home, she met Stephen, who seemed sad and said that Tara had just left home. Although Stephen refused to cooperate with the police, he hired a private investigator, a former FBI agent, to investigate the case. However, this investigator also failed to find Tara. The police decided to change their approach and contacted the nanny agency that employed Tara and Stephen. They discovered an important piece of information. Before hiring the German nanny, they had a total of 6 other nannies, but none of them had worked there long term. Police interviewed the nannies, most of whom said Stephen behaved strangely and unnervingly. They said he would rummage through their belongings, ask personal questions, and verbally abuse them. The police began investigating why the last nanny from Germany had a completely different description of her time with the family. They had only heard good things about Stephen. To clarify the matter, the police monitored the nanny's emails and phone calls. This led to an unexpected piece of information. The police discovered text messages between her and Stephen, which showed that they had been in a relationship. It was learned that the 19-year-old had been having an affair with him during Tara's business trips and that the relationship continued until she quit her job and had to leave the country. Although this was an important clue, the police could not yet conclude that Stephen was involved in Tara's disappearance. Therefore, they continued to look for other evidence. During the investigation, the police talked to Tara's relatives and friends and found that most of them did not like Stephen because of his strange behavior. They believed that Stephen wanted to control Tara's every move and often caused conflicts with her family. The police also found another important piece of information. Stephen's ex-girlfriend, whom he had dated before meeting Tara, contacted the police and revealed something surprising. According to her, Stephen contacted her again a few months ago, and their conversations gradually became intimate. Eventually, Stephen expressed his desire to start a romantic relationship with her, even though they were both married to other people. Stephen also complained about Tara and her frequent absences. He suspected that she was cheating on him with her boss. To verify this, he installed tracking software on her computer, allowing him to read her messages, but he found no evidence of Tara's infidelity. This information made the police even more suspicious of her husband's involvement in Tara's disappearance. However, the police still needed more evidence. Since it had been several weeks since Tara went missing, they began to consider the possibility that she was no longer alive and began an extensive search for her body. Police, along with volunteers, began searching the area around Tara's house and a large park nearby for several miles. However, the search lasted for several days and still yielded no results. But everything changed on February 28th. A woman walking in the park discovered something strange under a tree along the path. A plastic bag was covered with branches and snow, but it was clear that there was still something inside. Therefore, she decided to examine the bag closely. When she looked into the bag, she discovered rubber gloves and metal fragments along with a dark red substance at the bottom of the bag. She called the police to report the incident, and she decided to keep the bag and turn it in to the police. Police suspected the dark red substance could be blood, so they sent the bag to a lab for testing. However, due to the large workload, experts said the DNA analysis could take up to 2 months. In the meantime, experts have tested the bag and confirmed that the dark red substance is indeed human blood. The police focused all their efforts on the area where the bag was found, mobilizing all resources to investigate. Meanwhile, Stephen did not participate in the search. Instead, Stephen spent his time giving an interview to a news channel, giving many suspicious answers. Stephen repeatedly criticized Tara for being away from home so often. He called her a bad mother and claimed that he shouldered most of the responsibility for taking care of the children. When the reporter asked about their financial situation and whether he was living off Tara's money, Stephen became angry. He insisted that he did not need a single penny from Tara. During the interview, Stephen accused Tara of having an affair but did not provide any evidence. He repeatedly criticized Tara. The police obtained a search warrant for Tara and Stephen's home. The police arrived at Stephen's home. At the same time, Stephen returned from an interview with a reporter. The police informed him of the search warrant for his home. Stephen opened the door for them and then called his lawyer. The lawyer asked the police if Stephen was under arrest. The police replied that he was not. Stephen then said that he was going to walk his dog and left. During that time, the police searched each room in the house. They eventually arrived at the garage and found a large green bin containing several plastic bags. When they opened one of the plastic bags, they found an unknown substance and women's clothing. When the police opened the other bag, they discovered that it contained human remains. After examining a total of 5 bags in the bin, the police quickly confirmed that they contained the remains of a woman. Police believed they had found Tara's body and suspected Stephen of being her killer. However, Stephen did not appear, so the police immediately launched a search for him to prevent him from fleeing or causing harm to others. Meanwhile, the police requested reinforcements to search the park for Tara's remains as more remains were still missing from the garage. Over 100 police officers from neighboring counties were called in to assist in the search, and their efforts soon paid off. A few hundred meters from where the bag was found, the police found another body part. Then they found the head. Due to the cold weather, the rest of the body was quite well preserved, helping the police confirm that it was Tara. The police continued to search and found some more body parts. However, in the evening, the search had to be stopped until the next morning. During this time, the police also tried to locate Stephen but were unsuccessful. They contacted his friends, and one of them revealed that Stephen had called him, informing him that the police were searching at Stephen's house and asking to pick him up on the way. Stephen's friend came to pick him up and took him home. On the way, he noticed that Stephen's behavior was very strange. He seemed scared, his hands were shaking, and he seemed very depressed. When Stephen arrived at his friend's house, Stephen said he wanted to see his children and borrowed a car from his friend. However, Stephen's children were at his sister's house in another state at the time. The friend agreed to lend him the pickup truck, and Stephen left. In order to track Stephen, the police requested his phone and credit card information. This helped them quickly determine Stephen's travel route. By monitoring his withdrawals and calls to his sister, the police realized that Stephen was on his way to see his children. Realizing this, the police immediately set out to track him. An unexpected event occurred. The police received a call from a German woman with whom Stephen had a relationship. The woman said that Stephen had just contacted her and confessed to killing his wife, Tara. According to him, they had argued that night and he became violent after Tara slapped him. In a fit of rage, Stephen pushed Tara and she fell to the floor, resulting in her death from head injuries. After this confession, the police no longer had any doubts about Stephen's guilt. However, they still needed to catch him. For hours, they searched the area along the highway leading to the neighboring state. They eventually found Stephen's car near the entrance to the national park, but he himself was nowhere to be found. The police searched the area and after several hours of searching, they found Stephen using a thermal imaging camera. He was lying under a tree, wearing light clothing and in a dangerous state of hypothermia. The officers noticed that he was suffering from an unusual condition, often talking to trees and mumbling incomprehensible sentences. Fearing that he was in danger, the officers quickly airlifted him to the hospital. At that time, his body temperature was only 88 degrees Fahrenheit, but doctors were able to save him. However, he needed time to fully recover. While Stephen was in the hospital, he was charged with murder and the case was transferred to court. Interestingly, on the same day, Stephen's attorney refused to defend him. When asked why, Stephen's attorney gave a vague answer. A new attorney was then appointed for Stephen. Meanwhile, forensic pathologists began investigating Tara's remains. One of the most experienced pathologists in the country, who had worked on such high-profile cases as the JFK case and the JonBenet Ramsey case, was appointed as the chief medical examiner. After examining Tara's remains, the chief medical examiner concluded that Stephen's story did not match the facts. According to Stephen, Tara died of head trauma, but the investigation actually showed that Tara's cause of death was strangulation. When Stephen recovered, the police came to the hospital to see him and he told them what happened that night. The incident started when Tara returned and said she had to leave a day early. This led to a heated argument between the two. In a fit of rage, Stephen attacked Tara. She tried to leave, but he held her back. Tara defended herself by punching Stephen in the face, which angered him and he attacked her. The incident escalated when Stephen yelled at and strangled Tara. He then dragged her body down the second floor to the garage and put her in the trunk of his car. Meanwhile, the nanny returned home. To cover up his crime, Stephen told her that Tara had left him. The next day, he took the body to his father's workshop while making sure no one else was there. To cover his tracks, Stephen destroyed all of Tara's documents and personal belongings, then used a saw to cut her body into pieces. A few hours later, he packed the remains into plastic bags, placed them in a container, and returned home, leaving the body in his car for several days. He pondered how to dispose of the remains while creating an alibi for himself. He repeatedly called Tara and left messages on her voicemail, begging her to come home. Stephen took his son's sled and went to the park. There, he placed the container containing Tara's remains on the sled and began pulling it up a hill to avoid the crowded area. However, the rope he was pulling the sled with was not secure, and it slipped out of his hands. The sled began to roll down, the container tipped over, and the bags containing the remains spilled out. After picking up the bags, Stephen put the container back on the sled, and after a while, he found a remote place to bury the bags under the snow. He then left the park. A few days after he left, the police began looking for Tara, and the detectives announced that they would begin a search in the area of the park where Stephen had buried the bags. Stephen became panicked, remembering that the largest bag had been poorly hidden and could soon be discovered. To avoid this, he decided to move the bags to a safer place. Stephen went to the park, picked up a few bags, shouldered them, and carried them to his father's workshop, placing them on the roof. The next day, before going to the interview, he took the box from home, went to the workshop to carry the bags back to his garage. However, the next day, the police obtained a search warrant for the house. There, they found the bags in the box. When the situation became clear, Stephen confessed that he had not originally planned to surrender. During his conversation with the police, Stephen showed no remorse for his crimes. Instead, he often smiled and joked even as he described the process of hiding and disposing of the body. While Stephen awaited trial in prison, his children continued to live with his sister. This did not please Tara's family. Despite this, Stephen's sister continued to keep in touch with him, even feeling sorry for him and responding to jokes about Tara's murder. Tara's family eventually won custody of the children, but Stephen's family was still allowed to see them. In November 2007, Stephen's trial began. However, he did not deny his guilt. His new attorney then tried to get Stephen to get a reduced sentence. The attorney explained that Stephen and Tara's troubled marriage and Tara's frequent absences were the main reasons for Stephen's crime. During the trial, Stephen had lied about Tara's plans to come home a day earlier. Tara's sister, who had spoken to her before the murder, also confirmed this information. During that conversation, Tara told her sister that she would be home soon after that, as she did every week. There was no evidence that Tara had lied to her husband. Tara's boss said that Tara's relationship with the man was purely business, which was confirmed by their emails and text messages. The prosecution failed to prove that Stephen had planned the murder in advance. He had clearly committed the crime in a fit of rage, which could have resulted in a second-degree murder charge instead of a first-degree one. On December 21, 2007, the jury unanimously found Stephen guilty and he was sentenced to a minimum of 50 years in prison. Stephen's attorney attempted to appeal the verdict, but to no avail. He has since served time behind bars. But his story didn't end there. Tara's murder captured the attention of millions across the country, and Stephen clearly enjoyed it. While in prison, he began writing a book and begged to have it published with the help of his sister. They even discussed the possibility of turning it into a movie, and Stephen considered which famous actor could play him. In 2008, something else came to light. Stephen's children told their aunt that they had actually seen their father kill their mother that evening. They came out of the room after hearing screams and witnessed the whole thing. When this information appeared in the media, Stephen's relatives accused the children of lying and continued to protect him. That same year, it was revealed that Stephen's father, unlike other relatives, did not support him, could not live with what his son had done, and Stephen's father's body was found in his home. To this day, Stephen remains behind bars and will only be eligible for parole in 2058. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Belinda Temple. Belinda Temple was born and raised in Texas. In 1986, Belinda went to college in her hometown, while her twin sister, Brenda, left to study at Stephen F. Austin University. Belinda decided to stay with her parents because she was dating Marshall Kummer, who was 3 years older than her. She was completely absorbed in the relationship. However, Belinda's parents were not pleased. They were concerned that the relationship would disrupt her studies, leading to her having children early and dropping out of school. This caused a lot of tension in the family. Belinda's mother, Carol, did not agree to her daughter living with Marshall. Belinda was a strong-willed and determined girl, and she may have taken her mother's advice as a threat. So at a family dinner when Marshall was invited, Belinda and Marshall, despite their mother's objections, announced that they were getting married. The atmosphere at the dinner table became heavy and quiet. Belinda decided to get married to prove to her parents she was an adult. Her boyfriend wasn't eager but didn't refuse. They married without a grand celebration, with Belinda wearing her sister's white dress and spending the day with friends drinking champagne. The next day, she moved in with him at his parents' place. The marriage was mainly to stop her mom's criticism and gain independence. But not 6 months later, Marshall began to spend little time at home, saying he was working late, but was actually with another woman. Belinda found out when she noticed that her husband was acting strangely one day. She waited until his workday was over and followed her husband, and that's when it all came to light. Marshall was walking hand in hand with some strange woman, most likely with his colleague. Belinda didn't start any arguments or jealousy, she just packed her things and went back to her mother. Marshall kept trying to ask for Belinda's forgiveness, but she wouldn't budge. After that, they soon divorced. In 1987, Belinda had nothing to keep her in her hometown, so she decided to follow her sister to Stephen F. Austin State University. Her time at the university was a positive experience for Belinda. It seemed that she had found her purpose. In addition to studying, Belinda also worked part-time as a basketball coach, and the young girl had very high expectations. At the same university, Belinda met David Temple. Like Belinda, he was also a part-time coach, but in soccer, and he was also a member of the university soccer team as captain. For David, soccer was an integral part of life. He had started practicing soccer since he was a child, and from that time on it was clear that he had the potential to become a star at school. He often played soccer very successfully for the team and was respected by all the teachers, despite his unpleasant personality. David can easily insult or even hit someone, but he gets away with it easily when he is on the field during a match. He often starts the match in a heated situation and then takes a long time to calm down. One of David's teammates said that he has an aggressive nature because of his steroid use. However, in their relationship, David acts completely differently from Belinda. He becomes a caring person and loves her very much. As soon as someone smiles at Belinda, David becomes jealous and tries to clarify his relationship. Belinda met David's family and they were impressed with her. They thought that Belinda and David had a lot in common. But Belinda's sister was not happy about the relationship. They knew Belinda as a strong-willed and independent person before, but as the relationship began, they noticed a change in her. Belinda became withdrawn, quiet and modest, and her life seemed to revolve around pleasing David. Belinda also began to distance herself from her family. She called her parents less often and stopped visiting home as she used to. This was a worrying sign in a toxic relationship. However, David and Belinda continued their relationship. They bought a bull terrier and named him Shaq. After graduating from college, they decided to get married. In January 1999, David and Belinda Temple were expecting their second child. Belinda was nearing her due date, and doctors predicted that she would go into labor in a few weeks. As a pregnant mother, Belinda often felt tired and fatigued. She also had to care for her son Evan. To give his wife some rest, David decided to take Evan for a walk in the park that evening. They walked in the fresh air, but soon felt tired and hungry. They then went to a restaurant for a bite to eat. When they got home, David was shocked to find the front door of his house broken. To keep Evan safe, David quickly took his son to a friend's house who lived nearby, and when his son asked why he couldn't come home, David lied and said his mother was in the hospital. One of David's neighbors, Quentin Harland, had just opened the door to the unexpected visitor, David. He carried his son straight into the living room and quickly returned to the house. Quentin was confused by this and yelled for his wife to watch the child and ran after David. He asked David, "What's going on?" But when he saw the broken front door of the Temple house, Quentin realized that David probably had no idea what was waiting for him inside. When he entered the house, Quentin saw a horrible scene. Everything was in ruins, the cabinets were open, furniture was scattered on the floor, and especially there were blood stains on the floor leading to the stairs. Quentin quickly pushed David aside and saw under the stairs, in the dressing room, Belinda lying face down with her arms outstretched in a large hole in the back of her head. David seemed too shocked to say anything or rush to his wife's body. He took out his cell phone and called the police. Police immediately rushed to the scene but did not enter the house immediately because the Temple family's dog, Shaq, was aggressive. The dog growled and barked at the uniformed officers, prompting one of them to draw his gun. However, the situation was calmed when David Temple came out of the house, then led the dog into the garage. When the officers entered the house, they investigated the scene and concluded that it appeared that a robbery had occurred. They speculated that the burglars did not know that the homeowner was in the house at the time, so they shot her to avoid exposing witnesses. The police began investigating the crime scene. They wondered how the burglar could have entered a house guarded by a ferocious bull terrier. They began to investigate carefully. At the main entrance, the police found broken glass. But this glass was not broken by someone trying to unlock it from the inside, as the glass fragments would have been concentrated near the threshold. Instead, the glass fragments were located far from the door, to the right of the entrance. This indicated that the main door was unlocked and the glass was broken, and it was unclear why the burglar did so. The police opened a box on the nightstand in the living room and found several pieces of jewelry that appeared to be gold. It was unclear why the burglar did not take these pieces of jewelry. The more they investigated, the more suspicious the police became that something was not right around the case. The police's experience with robberies had taught them that the criminal would usually take whatever was valuable and could be found. But in this case, nothing seemed to have been taken. And the fact that the dog was still in their minds was a big deal. Something was wrong with the case. In the murder, the wound suggested the victim had been shot in the back of the head. It is likely that the weapon used was a 12-gauge shotgun, since the victim was kneeling with his back to the killer. But shotguns were uncommon in robberies and were difficult to carry or transport without being detected, which made the police even more suspicious. In the murder of Belinda, it happened at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. A typical criminal would not dare go out with a shotgun in the daytime. David mentioned that he owned a few rifles. However, when the police came to search, the handgun involved in the case was not among the weapons that David had reported. The police asked David to come to the police station to file a report and confess the stolen items. Although worried, David agreed to participate. Police began investigating Belinda's relationships. A young boy named Riley Joe Sanders came to the attention of the police. Riley is a student of Belinda's at school. He has an explosive personality and is especially fond of skipping school. Belinda was not one of those teachers who turned a blind eye to student absenteeism. So when she noticed that one of her students, Riley, had been absent from class for months, she immediately reached out to her colleagues. She wanted to know if this was her problem as a teacher or if the boy was a systematic truant. Her colleagues answered that it was not her problem. The boy was brought up in a bad family, and no one cared about him. He appeared at school only rarely. Belinda couldn't leave it at that. That same evening, she visited his mother, who lived nearby, and had a serious talk with her, which later bore fruit. However, it wasn't quite what the young teacher had expected. Riley Joe Sanders came to class. But during a basketball game, when Sanders pushed his opponent and Belinda pointed out Riley's disgusting behavior, he insulted her with the last words and even said something like, "You'll answer to me for this, you better look around, especially in the evenings." Riley had no explanation for where he was on the day of the murder and had also threatened Belinda. He was brought in for questioning. His father had a .12 caliber gun, but when the police searched the house, they did not find a weapon. When Riley realized that the police suspected him, he confessed that he had been with friends on the day of the murder. He had kept quiet because he had been in a large group and did not want to hurt anyone. The charges against Riley were dropped. Beside that, the police began questioning Quentin Harland. David and Quentin were not only neighbors but also co-workers at the same school. They had a close friendship and often met outside of work to watch sports on TV or attend family barbecues. One day, David and Quentin discovered a new young teacher at the school named Heather Scott. Quentin showed special interest in her, even asking her out to dinner, but Quentin's efforts were unsuccessful because Heather declined the invitation. Quentin accidentally discovered a secret relationship between David and another woman. This made Quentin very angry and resentful because David was married and had a son. However, Quentin kept it a secret and did not reveal anything to others. In the work environment, David and this woman seemed to be a happy couple, and many people in the teaching staff had the same impression. However, no one knew that David had another wife named Belinda. Belinda did not suspect that her husband was having an affair. In fact, she even shared with Quentin that she suspected that David was cheating, but Quentin reassured her that David was a good man and could not do such a thing. However, the way David treated Belinda also changed over time. In the past, he was very respectful and loving towards her. But now he often insulted and hurt her. He called her fat, even though she had only gained a little weight after giving birth. He also often asked her to go to another room when there were guests in the house, as if she did not deserve to be with everyone. Belinda felt extremely unhappy and lonely when faced with this treatment from David. She did not dare to talk seriously with him about this, but cried at night and felt bad about herself. Meanwhile, David was in a very happy new romantic relationship with Heather. David increasingly distant from his family. The psychological pressure he put on his wife was increasing. Although he never raised a hand to hit her, their interactions consisted almost exclusively of insults. At this time, Belinda learned that she was pregnant. When she received this news, she forgot all of David's previous mistakes and felt very happy. It seemed that David also tried to present himself as a happy father, but he was unsuccessful. Sometimes David did not come home at night, and Belinda was afraid to ask him why he was absent at night. She was afraid that her husband might become very angry and cause a scandal. Therefore, Belinda often had to do everything herself while preparing for the birth of the child. She went shopping, painted the walls herself, and assembled the furniture she had bought. David seemed unconcerned and made no effort to help his wife. Belinda prepared everything for the upcoming baby herself, while David seemed to be only concerned with his new relationship. Christmas was approaching, and Belinda was 8 months pregnant. She decided to discuss with her husband David what gifts they would give each other for the occasion. However, David suggested that they skip giving each other gifts this year. He thought it would be better if they used their savings for the upcoming baby, as the doctors had warned that she might go into labor early, and the baby might be born before the new year. When Christmas came, although they had agreed not to give each other gifts, David did not give Belinda any small gifts. Instead, he suddenly packed his things and said that he would spend the New Year holiday hunting with his friends. Belinda felt disappointed and shared the situation with her sister. Her sister decided to help Belinda feel less alone. She also wanted to be there to care for Belinda, as doctors had warned that labor could start at any moment. What Belinda did not know, however, was that David had not gone hunting with his friends. Instead, he had spent the holiday with Heather, who was wearing a gold necklace that was said to have been a Christmas gift from David. After the death of Belinda Temple, David remarried Heather in 2001 and they had a son, Evan. But in November 2004, David's peace was shattered when the police came knocking on his door and arrested him on suspicion of murdering his ex-wife. David continued to deny any guilt. Investigators discovered that his new relationship with Heather may have been the motive for the crime. David's co-workers said that when Belinda became pregnant, David often bragged that he had found a younger, more beautiful woman to replace his wife. According to the prosecution's report, David killed Belinda as soon as she got home, still wearing her uniform and work boots. He then staged the crime scene to look like a robbery by making a mess of the house and quickly taking his son to the park to create an alibi. The prosecution also added that nothing was stolen from the house, and there was a vicious dog in the yard that would not let any stranger in. The murder weapon was probably dropped by David in the rice paddy, as witnesses saw David's car stop near the paddy, with only Evan in the car at the time. However, the shotgun was never recovered in that area. Heather's testimony claimed that before Belinda's murder, her relationship with David was not serious, and she did not even love him. These words certainly did not please Temple and introduced confusion into the jury's decision. Could David kill his wife for a non-serious relationship? Or was Heather lying to save her husband? It wasn't until 2023 that the case was revisited. David was found guilty after all and was sentenced to life in prison with parole after 17 years. His son Evan, while the trial was ongoing, did not believe that his father was capable of such a cold-blooded murder and supported him until the last moment. Hi there, investigators. It's time to uncover the truth behind another case. The case of Kenneth Keith. Michael Hawkinsmith, 35, was born in Danville, Kentucky. He was a well-known pastor at a local church in his community. After many years of service there, he chose to take a job at a local pawn shop named ABC, while still working part-time as a pastor. Due to health issues faced by the previous owner, Michael eventually took over the pawn shop. Michael was an honest and helpful person, which allowed him to easily build relationships with customers. In his personal life, he was married to Angela, and they had 2 children, Andrew and Naomi. Michael and Angela owned a pawn shop called ABC Gold, Games and More, located in Danville, Kentucky. They homeschooled their 9-year-old son, Andrew, and cared for their newborn daughter, Naomi. Andrew frequently visited the pawn shop and saw it as his play area. On the morning of September 20th, 2013, the Hawkinsmiths visited the ABC store as intended. During that morning, Dan Smith, a frequent visitor to the pawn shop, arrived as scheduled. Smith, often referred to as the Gold Man, specialized in trading gold between pawn shops throughout the state. Approximately 15 minutes after the store opened, while Michael and Smith were conducting their business, a bearded man entered the store and instructed everyone to get on the ground, leading to a series of alarming events. Andrew was at the ABC store when his mother, Angela, told him to hide. Sensing the tense situation, he quickly called the police to report what was happening. 6 minutes after the alarm was raised, the police arrived at the murder scene. When they entered the building, they discovered a significant trail of blood that led them to Michael Hawkinsmith. They then found his wife, Angela, 38, and another victim, Dan Smith, 60, a broker, on the opposite side of the counter. All 3 victims had sustained severe injuries from gunshot wounds to their heads and bodies. Police later discovered 9-year-old Andrew and 14-month-old Naomi hiding in a closet. They had endured unimaginable trauma and were left without their parents, becoming orphans. While investigating the crime scene, police discovered 14 spent shell casings and 3 intact bullets, along with a briefcase belonging to Dan Smith. Notably, the victim's personal belongings and all the cash in the register were left untouched, indicating that robbery was not the motive. The investigation was further complicated by the absence of surveillance cameras at the pawn shop, requiring police to look for potential witnesses. An employee from Rainbowy Cleaners, a nearby dry cleaning business, offered crucial information by describing a vehicle that had been parked near the shop that morning. The vehicle involved was a silver pickup truck, driven by a large man with a bushy beard. While one team of investigators searched the area, another team had the difficult task of informing the victim's closest relatives about the tragedy. Michael's parents were heartbroken by the news but felt grateful that their grandchildren, Andrew and Naomi, had survived. The tragic news also reached the daughter of the 3rd victim, Dan Smith. Dan was involved in buying precious metals and was knowledgeable about his field, which helped him connect with various people. His business often required him to handle large sums of cash, sometimes reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars. Police began to suspect that Dan Smith might have been the main target of the criminal. Through surveillance, they learned that before visiting the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop, Dan Smith had stopped at the Lawson Jewelry Store in Harrodsburg, located 10 miles northeast of Danville. Inside the jewelry store, investigators found a surveillance camera installed on the far wall, which recorded every customer who entered and exited. They wanted to see if anyone was following Dan Smith. At 8:16 a.m., Dan Smith entered the store, and there were no other customers present at that time. Dan Smith was seen carrying a briefcase that looked exactly like the one later discovered at the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop. He smiled at the woman working behind the counter and then walked toward the back of the store. A short time later, he came back into view on the footage, talked briefly with an elderly woman who had just walked in, and then left the store quickly. The footage from the exterior camera did not reveal any suspicious activity. The police could only keep an eye on the man, not realizing that he would soon be involved in a tragic incident. Andrew Hawkinsmith was taken to the police station to give his testimony. He explained that he was at the pawn shop with his parents when Dan Smith entered carrying a bag of money. While Michael and Dan were having a conversation, a stranger entered and demanded the bag of money right away. Andrew reported that Dan Smith quickly handed his bag of money to a stranger. He mentioned that his father asked the man to stop, but the man shot his father with a handgun that looked like the one Andrew usually played with. Following this, his mother told him to take his younger sister, Naomi, to the back of the store and hide in the closet. Andrew grabbed his sister and found a hiding spot. At that moment, the criminal aimed a gun at Angela. The 9-year-old boy suspected the stranger was after money. He described the stranger as a very tall man with a fake-looking beard, matching what a witness from Rainbow Cleaners had reported. During their investigation, the police looked closely at the Hawkinsmith family's business. They found out that the ABC Gold Games and More pawn shop was actually owned by Steve Devine. Usually, he was present during transactions on Fridays with Dan Smith, but on the morning of September 20th, he was not there. This absence raised alarms, and finding out where he was became a major priority. Steve Devine reported an allergic reaction that morning, leading him to cancel all his appointments. His wife supported his account. Additionally, his alibi and the absence of a silver pickup truck in his possession helped clear him as a suspect. Steve Devine explained that there were no surveillance cameras in the pawn shop because the previous owner, Kenneth Allen Keith, had removed the security system. The new owner had not yet installed a replacement. Kenneth Allen Keith, 48, is a pastor, just like Michael Hawkinsmith. After being diagnosed with brain cancer, he sold his pawn shop. However, he still owns a similar business called Gold Rush Buyers, located in Pulaski County near Danville's Bowles district. Kenneth and Michael have been friends for 15 years, a bond that started when Michael worked at a church youth camp. The Hawkinsmith family held a deep respect for Pastor Kenneth, who was like a cherished uncle to Andrew. As investigators lacked significant leads, they opted to review the street surveillance footage from around ABC Gold Games and More, as well as several pawn shops. They discovered a camera located on the office building of Danville Rentals, a real estate company. The surveillance video recorded a silver pickup truck at 8:45 a.m., but the footage was too blurry to identify the license plate or the make of the vehicle. However, eyewitness testimony from Rainbow Cleaners was crucial in helping the police identify the vehicle involved. The witness noted that the vehicle was an older model with a unique square body shape. The video evidence also clearly displayed a square rear bumper that matched this description. The color, type, and shape of the vehicle indicated that the police may have located the criminal's vehicle. They then expanded their search to surveillance systems further away from the pawn shop. At 8:17 a.m., cameras at Ephraim McDowell Hospital recorded the same vehicle. Investigators confirmed that it was a silver Dodge pickup truck. Dan Smith's family was heartbroken by his death. Though they were filled with sadness, they attended the funeral and managed to control their anger. Meanwhile, the Danville police appealed to the public for any information about the crime or the vehicle involved. On September 24th, the police received a call from Tracy Hurl, a pastor from Warren, Michigan. He said he was a friend of Kenneth Keith and mentioned that during their last conversation, they talked about the Danville murders. During that conversation, Kenneth seemed different. Pastor Kenneth told Tracy that he was driving to Danville that day to get medication for his wife. Kenneth also expressed feelings of guilt about the situation, as he had allowed Michael Hawkinsmith to take over his former business. It became clear that Kenneth's relationship with the Hawkinsmith family was not as people had perceived. Tracy reported a conversation with Kenneth in which Kenneth accused Michael of being a fraud and claimed that Michael tried to take over his business. This raised suspicions and led to Kenneth being considered a suspect. To confirm Kenneth's alibi, investigators planned to check the surveillance footage from Good Neighbor Pharmacy, where Kenneth stated he bought medication for his wife at 9:24 a.m. Surveillance footage shows that Kenneth entered the pharmacy. However, just a few minutes before, he was not wearing a green jacket or a beard, which are significant features of a suspect. This does not eliminate the possibility that Kenneth could still be involved in the attack. Notably, there was a 6-minute interval between Andrew Hawkinsmith's call to the police and Kenneth's arrival at the pharmacy. The police investigated whether it was feasible to travel from the crime scene to Good Neighbor Pharmacy in just a few minutes. They determined that the trip took approximately 5 minutes, suggesting that Kenneth could have committed the murder, quickly driven to the pharmacy, and created a convincing alibi. Additionally, a key piece of evidence was that Kenneth owned a silver, unregistered 2008 Dodge pickup truck. All the evidence gathered was circumstantial and insufficient for an arrest. As a result, the investigators asked Tracy Hurl to take part in a series of staged phone calls targeting Kenneth. Thankfully, Tracy agreed to help. During these calls, Kenneth eventually expressed his real feelings about the Hawkinsmith family. Everyone had been anticipating this moment. Kenneth started talking about details of the case that had not been revealed before. He stated that he was in Danville, specifically at the pharmacy. He confirmed that he was at the pharmacy during the events in question. Kenneth then clarified that he had left Danville and gone back to Somerset. After that, he drove to the car wash to get ready for a planned family vacation. At 10:50 a.m., camera footage recorded Kenneth walking down the hallway to the cash register with a clear smile on his face. Additional footage from outside the building captured Pastor Kenneth leaving the car wash in the same silver Dodge at 11:25 a.m., which aligns with earlier images from various surveillance cameras in Danville. At that stage, police had sufficient evidence to arrest Kenneth. However, when they proposed a lie detector test to determine his involvement in the case, he responded oddly. He stated that he wouldn't be able to pass the test because, during his military service, he had been involved in special missions where he had killed several individuals. Investigators carried out a search warrant at Kenneth's pawn shop and uncovered crucial evidence. They found a fake beard and a large amount of cash, but there was no legal explanation for how he acquired it. Notably, they also discovered bundles of money tied with a ribbon, labeled with the name of the bank that issued them, suggesting that Dan Smith was a customer. Further investigation showed that the money found in Keith's pawn shop had recently been withdrawn from the account of a deceased broker, raising suspicions about his involvement. Moreover, investigators discovered several .22 caliber shell casings in the pawn shop. Ballistic analysis confirmed that these casings were fired from the same type of weapon used to shoot Andrew and Naomi's parents. Kenneth Allen Keith faced 3 charges: first-degree murder, 3 counts, and robbery. He thought that Michael and Steve were plotting to oust him from the business. Despite his beliefs, there was no evidence to support that Michael and Steve were involved in any conspiracy. When Kenneth met Dan Smith at the pawn shop, he attempted to devise a fake scheme to convince the police that the case was a robbery. However, the plan backfired when the police investigated and found no evidence of any wrongdoing by Michael and Steve. On September 20th, Kenneth drove his silver Dodge Caravan to Danville. He drove around the pawn shop until he spotted Dan Smith's car parked nearby. Kenneth then shot and killed Dan Smith, Michael Hawkinsmith, and Angela Hawkinsmith. After stealing all the cash, Kenneth calmly left the scene of the crime and went to the Good Neighbor Pharmacy. This visit was recorded by surveillance cameras, which helped him create a false alibi. Kenneth chose to wash his car in what seems to be an effort to eliminate any possible evidence that could be on it. Before his sentencing in 2017, Kenneth Allen Keith admitted guilt to all charges brought against him and was consequently sentenced to life in prison. In reflecting on the tragic events surrounding the Hawkinsmith family and Dan Smith, it's clear that this story resonates deeply with many. The heartbreak felt by the community underscores the fragility of trust, especially when betrayal comes from those we consider friends. As the investigation unraveled the chilling motives of Kenneth Allen Keith, it served as a poignant reminder of how quickly a normal day can transform into a nightmare. The innocence of the children, caught in such horrific circumstances, evokes a sense of profound empathy and admiration for their resilience. Furthermore, this case highlights the essential need for safety measures in our communities, reminding us of the importance of vigilance and awareness in our everyday lives. While the final sentencing brought some sense of justice, the emotional scars left on the families and the broader community will linger long after. Ultimately, may we take these lessons to heart, cherishing our loved ones and fostering a spirit of compassion and understanding in the face of unimaginable sorrow. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Janet Abaroa. For many people, family is the most important aspect of life. However, it can be very challenging to find a partner who will be a supportive and ideal husband and father. Unfortunately, love can sometimes cloud judgment, leading to relationships with people who are far from perfect and may even become a source of distress. Janet Abaroa was born on June 19, 1979, in a small town in Virginia. She was the seventh child in a large family that practiced the Mormon faith, which played a significant role in their lives from a young age. Janet was strong, independent, friendly, and intelligent. She had a deep love for children and always dreamed of becoming a mother. In high school, she played football and basketball and participated in swimming. During college, she continued to play sports for local teams, especially representing the University of Southern Virginia. In 1998, at a college game, Janet met a young football player named Raven, who played for the Southern Virginia men's team. Their relationship quickly turned into a love affair. Although Janet was friendly and outgoing, she was careful to adhere to her religious beliefs and kept her distance. Their relationship lasted for 2 years until Raven proposed to Janet. At the time, Janet was 20 years old and Raven was a year younger. They married in August 2000. To become financially independent, they both took jobs as sales associates at a sporting goods store, which required them to relocate to Durham, North Carolina. The couple rented a house in the suburbs and started their new jobs right away. From the outside, they appeared to have a happy marriage, and friends and neighbors often regarded them as the perfect couple. However, like many relationships, much of their happiness was for show. The couple quickly started facing issues. Janet often told her family and friends that she suspected Raven was cheating on her with various women. At one point, she left their home for a few days but eventually returned. This situation was very challenging for Janet, as she had always dreamed of a strong, loving family and valued loyalty. She felt devastated because she truly loved her husband and did not want to end their relationship. Compounding her difficulties, Janet discovered she was pregnant shortly after Raven admitted to cheating. Although she had always wanted a large family and was excited about the news, Raven's betrayal left her feeling overwhelmed and scared. She did not want to be a single mother. During her pregnancy, Janet grew close to her neighbors and made several friends among them. These friends even spoke to her husband, Raven, urging him to stop cheating on his pregnant wife. It seemed their words had an impact, as he promised to be a better husband. However, Janet remained unsure of the sincerity of his promises, given his history of deceit. Despite her concerns, life appeared to return to normal, especially after the birth of their son, Caden, on October 17, 2004. He became the center of Janet's world. The young family was struggling financially during a crisis. Janet, the mother, had stopped earning an income, leaving Raven as the only provider. However, his salary as a seller was not enough to support 3 people. Their landlord recognized their difficulties and agreed to postpone their rent for 3 months, understanding that the baby would add to their expenses. Despite this support, the couple still faced financial challenges, prompting them to seek assistance from the local church, which helped them in December 2004. The situation took a turn for the worse when their son was just 2 months old. Raven was arrested for stealing merchandise from the sporting goods store where he and Janet worked. He had stolen several tracksuits and sold them online, resulting in over $9,000 in losses for the store. As a consequence, Raven was fired, and overwhelmed by the shame of her husband's actions, Janet also decided to quit her job. Fortunately, Raven did not go to prison, but he was required to pay $10,000 in restitution to the store and received a 2-year probation sentence. Afterwards, Janet and Raven were both unemployed. They struggled financially. With a criminal record, Raven was unable to find regular work, but despite these challenges, the young family managed to make ends meet by working part-time. Janet's family received support from relatives while still holding down her part-time job. A few months later, they were faced with a devastating tragedy. On April 26, 2005, Janet picked up her son Caden from daycare to prepare dinner. That evening, her husband came home, they had dinner together, and after Janet and Caden fell asleep, he went to Mauriceville to attend a local mini-soccer game. When he returned home, he witnessed a horrifying scene. Janet was lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Nearby, Caden was lying in his crib, fortunately, was not injured. In shock, Raven immediately called the police. Reporting that his wife had been attacked and covered in blood, although he could not understand the extent of her injuries. He initially thought she had been shot. When paramedics arrived, they discovered that Janet had not been shot, but had been stabbed multiple times. She died instantly from a wound to her neck. Janet was murdered in a rented house in Gifts. Shockingly, she was pregnant and her unborn child was also killed. The police were horrified by the severity of the murder and needed to find out who could have committed such an act. After examining the crime scene, Janet's body was sent to the forensic laboratory. The autopsy revealed 3 deep stab wounds, one on her left hand, indicating that she had tried to defend herself. The fatal wound was to the neck, where the attacker had severed an artery, causing severe blood loss. With such injuries, Janet would have died within minutes. In addition, experts were unable to determine the exact time of death. At the crime scene, forensic scientists gathered a significant amount of evidence from the victim's body, which required thorough examination. Meanwhile, the police sought witnesses who might identify the likely perpetrator. Naturally, police first interviewed her husband, Raven Abaroa. He was called in for questioning multiple times. His statements helped piece together some of the events leading up to the brutal murder. He reported that on April 26, 2005, he left for Mauriceville to play a mini-football match and returned home at 10:40 p.m. When he called for his wife, she did not respond, so he went to the top-floor room. There, he found her murdered. Since Raven was away, it was difficult to determine when Janet was killed. The police began investigating potential suspects based on Raven's perspective. He theorized that he believed his wife may have chosen to end her life due to financial difficulties. Raven said that sometime before her death, Janet began to behave strangely. However, Janet's family and friends dismissed this idea. They knew her well and had never heard her express such thoughts. Furthermore, Janet was very religious and would never have considered such an act. At this point, police believed that Janet's death was not voluntary. The injuries she suffered could not have been self-inflicted. Additionally, there were clear signs that someone else was in the house at the time of the attack. A bloody shoe print and a single fingerprint were found near the body. The lack of broken windows or doors suggested that the victim had voluntarily allowed the attacker into the house. There were no signs of a struggle, except for defensive wounds on Janet's arm, suggesting that she had attempted to defend herself from a blow. The attack appeared sudden, especially since Raven said that Janet was asleep when he left. It was also unusual that nothing was stolen from the house except Raven's laptop and a few kitchen knives, which may have been used in the attack. The assassin did not take any other valuables, such as rings, jewelry, or expensive items. Therefore, it does not appear to have been a robbery. At that time, there was no solid evidence against the Raven, so he was released, although police started to investigate him more thoroughly. Following the incident, Raven's behavior became increasingly suspicious. Just a day later, he packed his belongings, took his son, and moved to Utah. This reaction seems understandable, as not every husband can stay in a house where such a violent murder took place. He needed the support of his loved ones, which is why he went to where his family lived. Raven's friends later commented that he did not act like someone who had lost a loved one. He did not seem to care about what had happened to his wife or who was responsible. Raven clearly had no intention of helping find the criminal or bring justice. He did not participate in distributing or preparing the reward notice or any other action taken by the police or the family. Instead, Raven simply left with the child and refused to cooperate further. The police observed that Raven was reluctant to cooperate at first and eventually ignored all requests. While Janet's family devoted all their free time to assisting the police. The police became suspicious when they discovered that shortly before the crime, Raven took out a $500,000 life insurance policy for Janet after her second pregnancy had begun. This was unusual because the family was facing significant financial difficulties and had never purchased such insurance before. Despite lacking funds for essential expenses, Raven managed to pay for the insurance premiums. Furthermore, the Raven contacted the insurance company to claim the payout soon after the attack, even before Janet was buried. All of this raised red flags, and suspicion mounted around the Raven. Police tried to get to know Raven and quickly realized that he had been dishonest from the beginning of his relationship with Janet. He claimed to be a devout Mormon and even said that he had been on a mission to Peru. This story was false. At the time, Raven lived in Salt Lake City, Utah, where he lived a quiet life after receiving his insurance money. During this time, he met Vanessa Pont, a single mother who lived nearby. They soon began dating. Raven was not like other men. His friendly demeanor set him special. He knows how to attract attention, quickly winning Vanessa over with his lies. He gains her trust by claiming that his wife died in a car accident. At the time, Raven is unaware that Janet's family is watching his every move. They discover his suspicious actions and are determined to find out what he will do next, hoping to gather evidence of his involvement in Janet's death. Janet's family quickly discovers that he lied about her death. But why would he tell almost everyone that his wife died in an accident? At first, Vanessa trusts him completely and doesn't want to know the details of Janet's fate. However, her curiosity eventually leads her to the truth. Janet was the victim of an unsolved murder, dead from 3 stab wounds. Despite this, Raven manages to fool the Vanessa. He repeatedly complains to her about the police and the public's obsession with blaming him for Janet's death, claiming he had nothing to do with it and that a robber killed his wife. Surprisingly, she believes him. Meanwhile, Janet's family contacts Vanessa, his fiancée. They warn her that Raven can be dangerous and advise her to stay away from him, but she ignores their concerns. She is charmed by him and puts her trust in him. After 3 years together, Vanessa and Raven married. Vanessa experienced Raven's mood swings and frequent tantrums, during which he lost control. His violent behavior left her in fear for her life. Their marriage ended abruptly, lasting only 4 months. As the pressure from the police continued, Raven decided to speak to the press. He expressed hope that the case would be solved and the killer found, so he could be left alone. At the same time, he completely denied any involvement in the crime. During this time, a new police took over the case, determined to ensure justice for the Janet's murder. Janet's family actively supported the police and cooperated with the investigation. In this context, Vanessa's anxiety increased. She frequently questioned whether her husband could have killed his first wife, leading her to doubt his honesty. Vanessa believed he was capable of such a terrible act. Subsequently, she spoke to the media, where she revealed that her ex-husband often acted inappropriately. She recalled the worst moment in their relationship occurring on Christmas 2018. During a dispute that Raven instigated, he locked Vanessa in the bathroom and expressed his desire to hit her, stating he hated her and wouldn't care if she died. This incident marked a turning point that led to their breakup. Vanessa admitted she was very afraid of Raven and believed he would easily harm her, just as he likely did with his ex-wife. The new police believe that Raven is responsible for this crime. The main challenge is Raven's alibi for the night of the murder. Around the time Janet was attacked, he was at the stadium playing mini soccer, and several witnesses have confirmed this. Furthermore, shoe prints found at the scene do not match Raven's shoes, and bloody fingerprints on the door do not belong to Raven. However, there is something troubling about his behavior. The police called Raven to ask him a few questions over the phone. Raven repeated his story, but he did not remember many details. This raised suspicions. Raven claimed the knife had gone missing from his home on the night of the attack, discovered during a move. He said that the police did not find the knives because they did not conduct a thorough investigation, which made him doubt their ability to catch the criminal. Meanwhile, the police believed that they had not missed anything, because forensic experts had spent a lot of time carefully examining the crime scene. For years, the investigation was unsuccessful. However, circumstantial evidence pointed to Raven as a suspect. Police spoke with Raven's former girlfriends, all of whom described him as very aggressive and prone to violence. Police also discovered that on the evening of the attack, Raven locked his dog in the garage, something he had never done before. Police believed this action was significant, thinking that Raven may have feared that the dog would protect Janet and prevent him from committing the crime or attract attention to the house by barking. Police discovered that the day before the crime, the Raven transferred data from his laptop to another storage device. This raised suspicions of premeditated murder since the laptop was reportedly stolen. On February 1, 2010, based on this circumstantial evidence, the Raven Abaroa was arrested on suspicion of first-degree murder and extradited to North Carolina. However, the evidence against him was insufficient, being entirely circumstantial, so police continued to gather more evidence for the trial. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they thoroughly examined the photos and the victim's body. The police noticed an open, empty contact lens case on the table next to the bed. This suggested that the Janet might have been wearing her lenses at the time of the crime. However, her parents insisted that she never went to bed with her lenses in. She always removed them before sleeping. This begs the question, was Janet killed before she went to bed and before he left? The forensic expert who conducted the autopsy overlooked whether the Janet was wearing contact lenses, but this was not intentional. Forensic scientists sometimes miss certain details because they seem irrelevant to the case. In this instance, however, the presence or absence of contact lenses could have been crucial evidence against Raven's falsehood. To verify this theory, exhuming the body became necessary. Janet's family supported the idea of exhumation, as they were determined to prove the criminal's guilt and seek justice for their loved one. In July 2010, the body was exhumed, and forensic experts discovered remnants of contact lenses in the eye, although the material was dry and disfigured. However, to convince the jury, a formal examination was needed. It was necessary to verify that the contact lens actually belonged to the Janet. To achieve this, a comprehensive study was conducted over the course of a year. Specialists used pig eyes fitted with contact lenses and subjected them to an embalming process similar to that used on human bodies before burial. The results of the experiments supported the initial hypotheses, confirming that at the time of the murder, Janet was indeed wearing contact lenses, indicating she had not gone to bed. This evidence contradicted the Raven claims. Raven Abaroa's trial began in 2013 and attracted considerable public attention, receiving extensive media coverage. Many people attended the trial. The jury was given detailed information about the facts of the case. Before the trial began, the prosecutor's office stated that they believed Raven was definitely guilty, although there was no direct evidence linking him to the crime. The case was brought to the Supreme Court based largely on circumstantial evidence. However, there was a large body of material that should have convinced a jury of Raven's guilt. Friends and family of Janet said that just a month before her death, she had expressed concerns about her husband. She mentioned that he had serious anger issues and often lost his temper and control. Janet repeatedly expressed her fear of Raven and said she intended to leave him. Janet's mother said she often witnessed heated arguments between the couple. In interviews with police, Raven admitted to having numerous arguments with his wife but adamantly denied any wrongdoing. During the trial, the defense pointed out to the jury that police initially focused on evidence pointing to Raven's guilt, ignoring other potential suspects, and ignored several pieces of evidence. First, a pair of footprints were found at the crime scene that did not belong to Raven. Second, a bloodstain was found on the front door, the DNA of which also did not match Raven. The third important clue that was overlooked was a shoe print that the criminal would have left when he stepped in Janet's blood near the body. The prosecution then relied on the fact that Raven was manipulative, prone to violence, and subject to sudden mood swings. One of Raven's girlfriends expressed her concerns about Raven's potential mental health issues. It was clear that he was cruel and manipulative by nature, frequently communicating with other girls behind the scenes. This behavior suggested that he may have planned the murder carefully and may have misled the police. The lover then recounted an incident where Raven forced her to have sex in a car parked on the side of the road. He acted so aggressively that she had no choice but to comply. She even deliberately left a strand of her hair in the car as evidence in case anything happened to her. One possible motive for the murder, according to the prosecutor, was Janet's unexpected pregnancy. She had only shared this news with a few close people, including some of her sisters. While Janet was excited about becoming a mother, she did not view her husband as the ideal father for the child. Given their challenging financial situation, the prosecution suggested that this news could have provoked anger in Raven. During the investigation, a clear lie from the Raven emerged. Raven maintained that he found his wife dead when he spoke to the police. However, during a confession at a local church, he revealed that when he found her, she was still alive and even attempted to speak to him before dying. Police suspected that the Janet was involved in a relationship with another man. She intended to leave her husband and had begun communicating with her ex-boyfriend, Scott. However, their messages suggested that they had only recently started talking and that there was no romantic relationship between them. In March 2014, Raven entered into a plea agreement with the prosecution and pleaded guilty to manslaughter for killing his wife. As a result, he received a 10-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. Custody of their son was given to Janet's family. Raven was released from prison on Christmas Day 2017. He returned to Utah and still lives there to this day. Janet's family was outraged by the sentence, as Janet can never return, while her husband continues to live his life. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Michaela Costanzo. Michaela Constance was born on May 3, 1994, in the small town of West Endeavor, Elko County, Nevada, USA. She was the youngest daughter of Celia and Theodore. She has two sisters named Christina and Delisha. She is famous for her cheerful personality, and she also easily spreading joy to her family and friends. She has a unique perspective on life. She uses her sensitivity to see the good in people and situations. Michaela was very close to her sisters, and they looked so alike that it was sometimes hard to tell them apart. In high school, Michaela became well known and popular. Initially, she stood out for her excellent grades, and later for her impressive performances on the track and field team, which she practiced diligently. Her peers saw her as a star. She also loved writing poetry, with a passion for literature and a dream of becoming a writer. When given the opportunity to demonstrate her storytelling skills, she eagerly took on the job of editing the school newspaper. Christina, her sister, witnessed her success firsthand, as they went to school together every day. Michaela and her mother, Celia, have a strong relationship, largely due to their frequent and open communication. Celia worked the night shift at a local casino, and little girl kept her informed of all her activities through messages. This thing allowed Celia to feel at ease, help her know where Michaela is and who she is with. This time, Michaela was going to meet Cody Patton, an acquaintance from childhood. Although they had grown apart over the years, they were reconnecting. 19 years old, Cody was also in high school and was popular, mainly because he was an outstanding football player on the school's team. His 2-meter height intimidated his peers, and his personality drew mixed reactions. At times, Cody could be extremely nice, but he also had a quick temper and could become easily irritated. Mickey's mother, Celia, recognized this about him. She acknowledged that Cody was an interesting young man who be incredibly sweet and charming. However, he was also emotionally unstable, making it difficult for both his classmates and parents to accept him. This may be why he aimed to join the Marine Corps after high school. He hopes it will help him find direction and purpose in life. Toni Fratto, Cody's girlfriend, was a strong supporter of his future plans. At 19, she was a former high school beauty queen and was deeply religious. Toni's parents still approve of Toni and Cody's relationship, even though Cody is not religious. Over time, Cody and Toni grew closer, and she became fully devoted to him. They got engaged and held an official ceremony at church. However, Cody's impulsive and hot-tempered nature remained an issue. After a heated argument with his father, Cody asked Toni if he could stay with her family. Her parents, Casey and Claude, hesitated when Toni suggested this idea, creating family tension. Toni's love for Cody, a young man with problems, was already a concern. Toni's parents feared that refusing Cody's request might lead their daughter to run away with him. So, they agreed to let Cody move in. They hope this will help them take care of their daughter, while also helping Cody succeed in the future. Over time, Toni's relationship with Cody's parents improved, and they acknowledged that Cody was not a stranger to their family. However, Toni remained uneasy. Even though Cody has proven to her that he wants to be with her, but she felt uncertain about their relationship, especially during his interactions with Michaela. Toni kept a diary to express her fears. She fears that Cody will fall in love with Michaela, and that he might leave her for Michaela. This tormented Toni, and her suspicions were not unfounded. Cody was secretly seeing someone else, but it wasn't Michaela, it was an older woman from out of town. Instead of reassuring Toni, he took advantage of her jealousy for his own amusement. He provoking her by interacting with Michaela in the school hallways and sending explicit texts. Toni responded to these provocations by publicly insulting Michaela. Michaela started a relationship with Javier, a young man from school. She wasn't interested in Cody, neither romantically nor as a friend. Therefore, it was unpleasant for her to encounter Toni, who was jealous and often insulted her. The situation worsened as Toni's attacks became more frequent, and arguments between Toni and Cody increased. They discussed their issues in front of classmates. On Thursday, March 3, 2011, Michaela went to school as usual. Christina informed Michaela that she couldn't pick Michaela's up after her running practice because she had a race out of town. Meanwhile, Cody had borrowed a van from a woman he was seeing and exchanged several text messages with Michaela throughout the day. After track practice, around 5 p.m., Michaela decided to walk home since it was only 2 kilometers away. As Michaela was leaving through the back door of the school, she encountered Cody. He attacked her, tied her hands, and forced her into a van. He then picked up Tony. They drove to the outskirts of town, to a vast desert area known as the Gravel Pits, about 8 kilometers west of the Nevada-Utah border. Once there, Cody and Tony pulled the girl out of the van, began beating her, and insulted her with horrible words. After hitting her several times with a shovel, they inflicted knife wounds on her and watched her die. They then removed Michaela's clothes and burned them along with her other belongings. Using the same shovel, Cody dug a shallow grave, placed the body inside, covered it with soil, camouflaged it with vegetation, and then fled the scene with Tony. When Michaela didn't show up and didn't answer calls or texts, her mother, Celia, became worried. As it was getting dark, she decided to leave work early. Celia returns home to find that her 2 older daughters, Christina and Delisha, have been asking around to see if they know where Michaela is. However, no one knows where Michaela is. So, she went to the police to report her youngest daughter, Michaela, missing. The West Wendy police immediately launched an investigation, led by experienced detective Donald Beckham. When they asked Celia if she had been in contact with Michaela in the past few hours, she replied no. The next morning, the police interviewed Michaela's classmates and friends, including Cody. Cody declared that the last time he saw her was with her boyfriend in front of the school gate. However, this contradicted the accounts of other witnesses. They said they saw Michaela at the back of the building after school. Meanwhile, at home, Celia is extremely scared and uncertainty. Delisha called and texted Michaela several times, hoping for a response. When they discovered Michaela hadn't come home the night before, Christina had dismissed it as teenage rebellion, but now she has changed her mind. Meanwhile, search parties scoured the desert around the city, while the police focused on questioning people close to Michaela, including her boyfriend Javier. He mentioned that Michaela was not someone who would hide things or act strangely. After 2 days of searching, investigators found several unusual things in the desert. They found fresh tire tracks, leading to a spot with fresh blood stains. There was also a suspicious-looking mound of dirt, covered in bushes. Detectives alerted forensic experts, and they quickly arrived at the scene. Upon excavation, they found Michaela's body, showing signs of beatings on her face and neck. A tie was also found in her hand. The police then reviewed the school CCTV footage for more evidence. As soon as Michaela's family was informed that her body had been found, Delisha broke down completely. Delisha felt as if a part of her had been taken away. She couldn't work or focus on anything, because she kept thinking about her younger sister's image, Michaela. Investigators have begun looking into Michaela's phone activity and her social connections. They discovered that at the time Michaela went missing, she had been calling and texting Cody, making him a suspect in the case. Further evidence came from school surveillance footage, which showed she and Cody together in the hallway leading to the exit. A few minutes later, she was gone. On the evening of March 6th, Cody arrived at the police station for questioning, accompanied by his father, Keith. During the interrogation, officers showed him video footage from the school's surveillance cameras, but he insisted he was not involved in the incident. Meanwhile, lawyers and investigators gave Cody time to review the case materials and allowed him to speak privately with Keith. Worried, Keith urged his son to tell the detectives everything. Keith begs him to understand the severity of his actions. Now, he must make amends by answering to Michaela's family. He accepted the possible consequences and expressed his readiness to face them. He also told his story of the incidents that took place that day. Cody recounted that after school, he and Michaela went for a walk to the gravel quarry. While there, she asked him to break off his engagement to Tommy and start dating her instead. When he refused, they had a heated argument. He claimed that Michaela hit him in the chest, and in self-defense, he pushed her away. Unfortunately, she hit her head on the car's rear bumper and began to convulse due to the strong impact. Panicking, he tried to knock her out by hitting her head with a shovel, but she stayed conscious. He then cut her throat. Once he realized Michaela was dead, he buried her. When questioned by the police, he said he thought about taking her body to a dump, but couldn't bring himself to do it. When asked about the zip ties on her wrists, he explained they were part of a plan to dispose of the body. After burying her, he sat there crying for several hours before going to find Tony. Despite his detailed account, Cody was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, possibly facing a death sentence. In this situation, Cody's family hired John Hudson, a well-known defense attorney. He specializes in helping murderers not receive the death penalty. Michaela's family didn't just feel the pain of losing their daughter, but were also in disbelief that Cody had so brutally killed his childhood friend. Christina was especially shocked and believed that if he was truly guilty, someone must have forced him to do it. On the other hand, from the start, Celia never believed his confession. She doesn't believe that Michaela considers Cody a friend, let alone ask him to be with Michaela's. Additionally, as a mother, she knew very well that Michaela hated scandals. When Cody was arrested, Tony wrote numerous letters to he, called him, and visited him whenever she could. She said she missed him so much and she would always support him. Meanwhile, the police tried to investigate further, hoping to find useful clues in their conversation. Tony's parents, Claude and Casey, were shocked by the incident and even asked Cody why he committed the crime. Cody simply replied that he didn't know why he did it. The lawyer pointed out that Cody's confession didn't explain all of Michaela's injuries, he suggesting that it was not an accident as Cody claimed. The injuries suggested they weren't caused solely by a shovel, implying that someone acted out of anger. To understand the situation better, the lawyer decided to question Tony. As the interrogation progressed, Tony appeared cold and indifferent. Her emotionless attitude is completely inappropriate, since she is Cody's wife, the man facing the death penalty in this case. In April 2011, just weeks after Michaela's death, Tony's parents left town, leaving her alone at home. That morning, Keith, Cody's father, arrived at her house and took her for a drive. During their conversation, he persuaded her to visit Cody's defense attorney and tell what happened. At the attorney's office, Tony agreed to let lawyer John document her account, which turned out to be completely different from what she had previously stated. Tony claims that after school, she received a text message from Cody, saying that he had kidnapped Michaela. The three of them then headed to the gravel pits. When Michaela and Cody got out of the car, they started arguing, but Tony said she couldn't see what happened. She only heard a noise that alarmed her, and she got out of the car to see what was going on. She saw Michaela lying on the ground and Cody digging what appeared to be a grave. When he stopped, Michaela was already unconscious. Then, they hit her several times with a shovel, and when she showed no signs of life, they took turns stabbing her. Tony also admitted to sitting on Michaela's feet to restrain her during her convulsions. The lawyer John, representing Cody and not Tony, quickly revealed Tony's confession to the police. Consequently, Tony, who was not initially a suspect, was arrested and charged with murder without bail. Forensic experts collected samples from Tony's home, car, and clothing to look for evidence that she was present at the murder scene. In mid-June 2011, the court decided that Tony should also stand trial for murder and kidnapping. The preliminary hearing was set for August 2nd, but in January 2012, Toni accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. In his testimony, Toni said that Cody was angry with Michael from the beginning. When she entered the van, she noticed that Michaela was very scared. Michaela sat in the back with her hands raised to her face. As they drove into the desert, Cody asked her to help him kill Michaela. Then, Cody asks Toni to watch Michaela while he digs a hole. Once he was done, he forced she to hit Michaela. She refused, so Cody began to beat Michaela. The next, he made she strike Michaela with a shovel. The blow hit Michaela in the shoulder. She then sat on the ground, holding Michaela's legs, and he attempted to slit Michaela's throat with a knife. 3 months later, the district judge sentenced Toni Fratto to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 18 years. The judge described it as the most brutal murder he had witnessed in his 20-year career. The motive for Michaela's murder remained unclear. On Wednesday, May 9, 2012, Cody appeared in court, pleading guilty to first-degree murder, also to avoid the death penalty. On Friday, August 24, in Elko Court, Cody Patton was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. He was imprisoned in Nevada State Prison. Later, in an interview with a well-known television company, Toni shared a more dramatic version of the tragic story. She revealed that Cody had been abusive and controlling of her throughout their time together. She admitted that because of the abuse, she was unable to fight back against him. Looking back, she believed she could have been his next victim. She also accused he of forcing her to participate in Michaela's murder. She said after witnessing him brutally beating Michaela, she feared for her life, leaving her with no choice but to comply. Michaela's mother, Celia, was unable to work for a long time and avoided going to restaurants where she had previously visited with Michaela. She feels sad about her increasingly distant relationship with her other daughter, Delisha. She explains that the tragedy of Michaela's murder changed Delisha so much that Delisha dropped out of school and left the city, estranged from her family. Everything at home reminded her of Michaela, which was overwhelming. The tragedy devastated 3 families: her family, Toni's family, and Cody's family. It will take Michaela's family and friends a long time to get over this loss. Cody will never see his family outside of prison again. Although Toni may be released from prison in the future, her father sadly says that when that happens, he may not be alive. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Andrew Bagby and Zachary Turner. This case is a deeply tragic and complex story that highlights the dark intersections of love and betrayal. A harrowing tale of violence, the failure of the justice system. The murder of Andrew Bagby, a promising young doctor, but his life ended tragically. What follows is custody battles and the tragic consequences of delay resolution, legal. Kathleen and David Bagby first met in the 196 at Disneyland while hanging out with mutual friends. At that time, David was serving in the U.S. Marine Corps. He was intelligent, charming, and sociable, which immediately drew Kathleen to him. They connected quickly and spent the entire trip talking, becoming inseparable soon after. Within 5 months of meeting, they got married. They settled in San Diego, California, where Kathleen became a nurse, while David transitioned to a career as a software engineer after his military service. They both dreamed of having children, but at that time, planning a family is difficult. Despite that, Kathleen eventually became pregnant, which was a joyful surprise for them. The arrival of their son, Andrew, was a wonderful event. Later, the family of 3 moved to the suburbs of San Jose. Andrew was friendly and sociable from a young age, a trait he inherited from his parents. He received several awards that highlighted his hard work and dedication. His best friend, Kurt Quenney, had been by his side since elementary school, and together they enjoyed making funny videos. Andrew valued family time and always prioritized being with his loved ones. When he started college, he began dating Heather, a girl in his classes. Inspired by his mother, he aspired to pursue a career in medicine, which allowed him to bond with her over shared discussions about the field. Their family was harmonious and served as a model for others. After graduating from college, Andrew applied to multiple medical universities, but was only accepted by one, which was a significant disappointment. He decided to reapply the following year and planned to work in the meantime to avoid burdening his parents. Just days after receiving the rejection letters, his mother discovered a misplaced acceptance letter from Memorial University of Newfoundland in Canada. This news changed Andrew's life dramatically. In 1995, he moved to St. John's, Canada, to attend the university. The following year, Heather also relocated to join him and enrolled in the same institution. However, Andrew's with her relationship began to deteriorate after a few months. His girlfriend unexpectedly ended their engagement without providing any explanation. To forget the pain, Andrew focused intensely on his studies. This continued until his third year, in the spring of 1999, when he met a woman named Shirley. This marked his first relationship after his breakup with Heather. Initially, this news was received very positively by everyone, especially his family and friends, as they were afraid that Andrew would not have the desire to build a relationship after breaking up with his fiancée. However, the joy was short-lived. Shirley was significantly older than Andrew. He was 26, while she was already 38. This age difference led to some misunderstandings between them. Shirley had graduated from Memorial University and worked as a teacher for many years. However, in the mid-90s, she decided to return to school to pursue a medical degree. She graduated in 1998 and began working as a resident in various hospitals. By this time, she had developed a questionable reputation. She was frequently accused of mistreating patients and being overly confrontational. One of her supervisors even noted in a performance review that he felt she was trying to manipulate him during their interactions. Additionally, she had been caught lying multiple times, which often resulted in conflicts. From the moment they met, Shirley became very controlling of Andrew. She followed him everywhere. His friends saw as excessively affectionate behavior. She would often hug him, touch him inappropriately, and talk openly about their active sex life, which shocked Andrew and his friends. When Shirley learned about Andrew's ex-fiancée, a beautiful girl named Heather, she became upset and started crying. Not only that, Shirley called other girls to boast about her relationship with Andrew. This led to her being perceived as inadequate. Andrew's friends and family did not like her. They often suggested that Andrew could find someone better, considering his calm demeanor and good looks. However, after his breakup with Heather, Andrew's self-esteem plummeted. He convinced himself that Shirley was the best person he could meet and that he shouldn't expect more. His loved ones could only wait and hope that their relationship would eventually end. After graduating from university in 2000, Andrew moved to Syracuse, New York, to start a job at a medical center. At the same time, Shirley relocated to Sac City, Iowa, a small town with a population of about 2,000, where she signed a 10-year contract to work at the county medical center. Andrew's family was relieved that he and Shirley had moved away from each other. However, Shirley was determined to keep their relationship alive, frequently reaching out to Andrew. Andrew was busy with work and rarely had time to visit her, but Shirley made regular trips to see him. During the time apart, she often called him on his home or mobile phone. One day, Shirley visited Andrew and stayed until he had to leave for work. After they said goodbye, she called him to say she had forgotten her purse at his apartment. Andrew gave her his keys, but when he returned home after his shift, He found that many more items were missing than just her purse. This raised suspicions about Shirley's honesty. Despite feeling betrayed, Andrew thought he didn't deserve better and chose to stay in the relationship. Andrew quickly realized that he didn't like his new job and home, so about a year later, he moved to the small cozy town of Trop, Pennsylvania, which had a population of 88,000. In 2001, he decided to pursue a career in family medicine, and this town seemed perfect for it. The close-knit community appealed to him. Andrew imagined himself as a doctor and a true savior for such a small town where everyone would know, love, and respect him. His dream was starting to come true, but then there was Shirley. She still wanted to be with him, however, by this point, Andrew was tired of their obsessive relationship and had fully focused on his work, so he insisted on breaking up. It seemed like Shirley didn't understand what was happening and continued to hold on to the hope that she could move in with him. Andrew began to ignore her, which led Shirley to become a stalker, even leaving him 30 voice messages a day. Despite his determination to end the relationship, in September 2001, Shirley informed him that she was pregnant and that he was the father. Andrew was happy about becoming a father, but did not want to be tied to such an intrusive woman. Whenever he spoke to a new girl, Shirley would find out and reach out to her, claiming that she was pregnant with Andrew's child. Unsurprisingly, these new relationships never lasted. During this time, Shirley was busy sharing the news about her pregnancy and claiming that Andrew would be a father. Initially, she considered having an abortion, but then decided to keep the baby. Her manipulations succeeded, and a month later, Shirley convinced Andrew to rekindle their relationship. They even started talking about getting engaged. At the end of October 2001, a meeting was held with Andrew's friends and family. They all witnessed Shirley being forced to return to Quince. Andrew hoped that after this, he would be left alone. But on the morning of November 5, 2001, just 2 days later, Shirley knocked on his door. He was on his way to work and didn't want to talk to Shirley, but she persuaded him that they needed to have an important conversation, so he allowed her to stay in his apartment. He suggested they meet at Keystone Park at 6 p.m. to talk. After working at the hospital all day, Andrew felt anxious. His co-workers noticed his distress and asked what was wrong. He explained that Shirley had shown up at his home again. They advised him to end things with her as soon as possible and not to waste any more of his life. Andrew mentioned he planned to meet Shirley that evening to finally break off their relationship and hope to feel free. Andrew plans to meet his best friend Simpson at a bar at 9:00 p.m. to celebrate his escape from an obsessive relationship. Simpson arrived on time, but Andrew never showed up. This was unusual for him, as he had never been late or missed a meeting before. Concerned, Simpson thought Andrew might still be caught up in a conversation with Shirley. Simpson decided they could catch up in the morning at work, but when Andrew did not return calls from Simpson, his family, or his co-workers, by 9:00 a.m., Simpson considered contacting the police to check on Andrew, but was too busy to do so. A message appeared on television that in Keystone Park, the body of a man in a medical uniform had been found, identified as Andrew Bagby, 28 years old. A homeless person collecting cans discovered his body at 6:00 a.m., lying in a parking lot next to his car. Dr. Andrew had been attacked by force 5 times in the back, face, and chest, and it appeared he was dead with a final shot to the back of the head while on the ground. Simpson quickly informed the police, explaining that they wouldn't need to search for the suspect for long since he knew who Andrew had last met and had a conflict with. He described Shirley's troubling behavior and mentioned that Andrew had planned to meet her in the park that evening to end their relationship, which Shirley was adamantly against. The detectives found these details significant and promptly reached out to Shirley, who was already back in her hometown in Canada. Shirley claimed she had been in Iowa all day because she was sick and had gone to visit her parents. Of course, this was a lie. She had actually come to meet Andrew and had stayed at his apartment before their scheduled meeting in the park. By this time, the police had interviewed numerous friends, colleagues, and family members of Andrew. They all pointed to Shirley as the only person with whom he had a conflict. No one believed her story. The most crucial evidence came from a witness who identified Shirley's car, a Toyota RAV4, which was discovered in the same parking lot. However, the authorities decided not to rush into pressing charges against her. They intended to use the next 2 weeks to gather a strong foundation of evidence. All signs indicated Shirley's guilt, and her false statement was quickly disproven. Witnesses and security camera footage confirmed that she was near Andrew's house early in the morning and later met him in the park shortly before the incidents occurred. According to the investigation, a woman purchased a .22 caliber weapon and received safety training on it. During the training, the instructor noticed a problem that caused a live bullet to jam next to a fired casing. What a coincidence, because Andrew had been shot with the same weapon. Detectives attempted to examine the weapon for ballistic evidence, but they was unable to find any. Shirley claimed she spent the entire day on November 5 resting in her bed in Iowa. However, she was caught lying when security camera footage and phone call recordings revealed she was actually on her way to Andrew. She left behind a significant amount of digital evidence, as she frequently called her ex-boyfriend Andrew, attempting to persuade him to rekindle their relationship. When Shirley arrived at Andrew's apartment early that morning, he let her in and allowed her to stay until he finished his shift. During that time, a pack of condoms went missing from his home, while a package with matching numbers was later discovered in Shirley's house in Iowa, where she returned after the shooting incident. This further confirmed that she was clearly pretending, as she completely forgot the sequence of events. It's strange that Heather is also mentioned in this tragic event. Although she usually avoided meeting, Shirley still found a way to confront her. Shirley immediately claimed that Andrew loved her more, that their intimate life was better, and that their love after his death would forever remain in heaven. Heather was so frightened by this that she requested a restraining order against Shirley. Interestingly, after the funeral service, Shirley almost immediately got ready and headed to Canada to assist the authorities. Andrew's relatives planned another funeral service and invited Shirley, hoping to lure her to the U.S., but she declined. As a result, the American police had to work with Canadian, but authorities due to bureaucratic challenges, which slowed down the process. Meanwhile, Shirley continued to live freely. On December 12, 2001, Canadian police arrested Shirley, but discussions about her extradition had not yet started due to additional bureaucratic issues. It was expected that she would remain in prison until these matters were sorted out. Surprisingly, she was released on bail the next day. As part of her bail conditions, she was required to surrender her passport and report to the police station every week. Her psychiatrist even contributed to her bail payment. At the age of 40, Shirley had to avoid contact with 8 individuals who had restraining orders against her, including her ex-husband. Investigators found her anxiety concerning as they reviewed her background. Shirley had been married twice and had 2 children from her first marriage. She had an affair with a man who later became her second husband, and they had 1 child together before divorcing. In 1993, Shirley lived with a roommate who was troubled by how Shirley treated her children. The roommate reported that Shirley often physically abused them, using her hands and other nearby objects. Unable to bear it any longer, the roommate moved out and notified the authorities about Shirley's actions. Witnesses also stated that Shirley physically assaulted her children and would leave them home alone for more than a day. However, her second husband contested these accusations, claiming she was a good mother. As a result of the investigation, Shirley gave custody of her children to their biological fathers and continued her life. In March 1996, Shirley began a relationship with a St. John's resident, Miles Doucet, who was 13 years her junior. After Doucet broke up with Shirley and moved elsewhere in Newfoundland, she began calling him repeatedly. In November 1997, Shirley confronted him in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and struck him in the jaw with her high-heeled shoe. After consulting with her parents, Doucet moved to Westtown Township, Pennsylvania, United States, in 1998. Shirley tracked the man to Pennsylvania, leaving threatening voicemails over the next year and visiting his apartment unannounced. He summoned state police on several occasions to order her to leave. On April 7, 1999, Doucet found Shirley lying semi-conscious outside his apartment, having ingested a total of 65 milligrams of over-the-counter medication in an attempt to self-harm. She was wearing a black dress, holding a bouquet of red roses, and had 2 suicide notes on her person. One was addressed to Doucet and the other to her psychiatrist. The latter read, "I'm not evil, just sick." Shirley was taken to the hospital, where she underwent gastric lavage. Ultimately, the investigators was revealed that she hadn't attempted self-harm. Instead, this was yet effort to manipulate the circumstances surrounding Andrew's death. Although Shirley's actions appeared alarming, they were typical for her. Her sense of impunity, the sympathy she received, and her lack of proper treatment allowed her to systematically torment those close to her. This ultimately led to a violent outcome. Shortly after being released on bail, Shirley held a press conference where she announced that she was 4 months pregnant. Upon learning this, Andrew's parents, Kathleen and David, sold all their belongings, emptied their savings, and moved to Canada to fight for custody of the child. Although it was only possible to say for sure after the birth, they were certain that the boy was Andrew's. He was born on July 18, 2002, and Shirley named him Zachary. The DNA test later confirmed that Andrew was indeed his father. When Kathleen and David arrived at the hospital, Shirley refused to let them into the room, and they were not allowed to see their grandson. Given Shirley's behavior toward her other children, Andrew's parents were worried about Zachary's safety and were frustrated by the slow pace of the Canadian legal system. They felt powerless and feared for their grandson's well-being while he was with his mother. The extradition process to the U.S. faced continuous delays for various reasons. Ultimately, they were only granted 1 hour per week to meet with Zachary, and these visits had to be supervised, as if they posed a threat to the child. They were even subjected to searches. Despite these challenges, Zachary became a source of joy for they, who had lost their only child after years of waiting and hoped. In November 2002, things began to change. Shirley was imprisoned, and the extradition process to the U.S. started. She voluntarily transferred full custody of Zachary to Andrew's parents, but under specific conditions. Shirley could call them every day, and they were required to visit her in prison once a week. The grandparents took this responsibility seriously and never missed a visit to comply with the conditions. Despite the distance and bad weather, they strictly followed all of Shirley's requirements because they feared that this could become a reason for her discontent and revoke their custody rights. In January 2003, Shirley was released again. She had appealed directly to the judge overseeing her case, asking for advice on how to avoid prison before being extradited to the United States to care for her son. Surprisingly, the judge agreed to meet with her and provided detailed recommendations. Despite the absurdity of this situation, Shirley was released due to her compliance. Immediately after that, soon after, Kathleen and David lost custody of Zachary, but they were now allowed to spend significantly more time with Zachary, without interference from Shirley or a social worker. Although the Bagby family was unhappy with this arrangement, the judge insisted there was no reason to believe the child's life was in danger. This strange occurrence still happens, even though Shirley is suspected of murdering Andrew and has exhibited disturbing behavior while in prison, including threatening another inmate with a fork. While Kathleen and David harbored deep resentment toward Shirley for their son's murder, they worked hard to maintain their bond with Zachary. It became clear that Shirley was exploiting this situation. She began to abuse her freedom by frequently calling Andrew's parents at all hours, demanding financial support. They was forced to follow Shirley's lead, buying food and things for a woman who did not want to work and did nothing. She frequently brought up Andrew's death, a topic his parents wanted to avoid. Kathleen and David celebrated Zachary's birthday at McDonald's, where the boy ran to hug Grandma Kathleen, which angered Shirley. She yelled that she wouldn't let Zachary love them more than his mother. From that point on, Shirley began to make life difficult for them. It seemed she wasn't genuinely interested in keeping custody of the child. Instead, she wanted to cause pain for Andrew's parents. A hearing on extradition was scheduled for September 2003, which was to be the final one before Shirley would be sent to the U.S. During the waiting period for this process, Shirley started dating a new boyfriend, but he found out about her suspicious history and broke off the relationship. True to form, Shirley began stalking him, making threats and claiming she was pregnant. Despite her efforts to contact him and create drama, he ignored her. On August 17, she called a friend and mentioned that she planned to take Zachary to confront this man. Later, she stopped on the street to ask for directions, and that was the last time she and Zachary were seen alive. Shirley Turner and her young son, Zachary, vanished without a trace. That same day, a couple on vacation found the bodies of a woman and a small boy about 20 minutes from St. John's. Police quickly identified them as Shirley and Zachary. An autopsy revealed that Shirley had overdosed on anxiety medication prescribed to her. This same medication was also detected in a bottle of baby formula. A witness reported hearing a suspicious crying sound from a child near the beach around 2:30 a.m., but he could not locate the source. Forensic experts determined that, after mixing her over-the-counter medication into Zachary's infant formula and drink it herself, she tied Zachary to her chest with her sweater and jumped from a fishing pier at Foxtrap Marina into the ocean. Both died from drowning. Shirley's car was discovered near the home of the man she was supposed to meet that evening. She had left her photos with him and the child, along with a letter claiming he had convinced her to take her self-harm and harm the boy. However, the investigation revealed that this was a typical manipulative tactic for Shirley. She aimed to create trouble for the young man, who was unaware of her intentions. The investigators was also confirmed that she was not pregnant, which was another manipulation. The death of Zachary was devastating for Kathleen and David. They cremated him, just as they had done with Andrew, and scattered his ashes in the same location. David later confessed that he was so terrified for his grandson's safety and overwhelmed by the Canadian authorities that he fell into despair, so he contemplated harming Shirley. David wanted to take matters into his own hands and punish Shirley, who had shattered their family. He kept this plan from Kathleen and regretted not acting sooner, believing that if he had, Zachary would still be alive and they could care for him. Ultimately, he decided against this course of action, hoping that the final hearing would lead to Shirley's extradition to the U.S., where they could have more options and finally gain custody of Zachary, their only source of happiness. When they learned of Zachary's death, Kathleen and David were so heartbroken that they even considered ending their own lives. However, they ultimately chose to focus their energy on fighting for justice to ensure that such a tragedy would not happen again. To reclaim justice, Kathleen and David appeared on television in the U.S. to share their story. They expressed their belief that the Canadian law enforcement system bore the most responsibility for the tragedy. Simultaneously, they initiated a campaign against the psychiatrist who facilitated Shirley's bail, which allowed her freedom during the investigation. His actions faced backlash, resulting in a $10,000 fine. Andrew's parents also criticized the judge who granted Shirley her release, enabling her to tragically take Zachary's life in October 2006. A over 500-page report by a child protection specialist was published, highlighting that Zachary's death could have been prevented. This report became a catalyst for reform in the Canadian judicial system. In October 2009, the Zachary Bill was introduced in the House of Commons, proposing significant amendments to the country's criminal laws. This legislation permitted judges to deny bail to individuals accused of serious crimes who attempted to evade justice, referencing the Shirley case. The case of Andrew and Zachary is not only a story of loss, but also of resilience and struggle. Andrew's parents, David and Kathleen Bagby, turned their unimaginable grief into a tireless campaign for change, shining a light on the flaws that allowed such a tragedy to happen. Their fight serves as a lasting testament to the love they had for their son and grandson, and a call to action for society to do better. While the pain of their loss remains, Andrew and Zachary's legacy is a powerful reminder of the importance of accountability, compassion, and vigilance. It is a story that continues to inspire efforts to ensure that such tragedies are prevented in the future, turning their memory into a beacon of hope for justice and reform. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Daniela Tabares. Daniela Tabares was born on May 8, 1998, in Cali, Colombia. She is the only child of Isabel Tabares, a single mother. Daniela did not know her father and had never met him. Their life was not easy. Her mother raised her alone. She lived with her mother, her grandfather, and her maternal uncle, who supported the family during difficult times. For many years, Isabel worked at a bank and saved some money. However, in 2010, when Daniela was 12 years old, Isabel was laid off from the bank and had difficulty finding a new job. To solve her financial problems, Isabel decides to use her savings for a trip to Florida, USA, where she believes there are more opportunities. However, she realized her savings were insufficient for the journey, so she borrowed money from several neighbors, promising to repay them once she secured a job in the United States. Isabel received support from her two older sisters, who had settled in the United States. They invited her to live with them and share the rent, helping her not to worry about housing. While Daniela attended school, Isabel began working as a cleaner. She was very determined and hardworking, with the desire to create a better life for herself and her daughter. Her sisters also helped her by sharing advice on how to succeed in America. Isabel realized that in order to become independent, she needed to be self-sufficient and start her own business. Within a year, she saved enough money to obtain a license and start her own business. Although she had to work hard, she always prioritized her daughter Daniela, whom she loved the most. At the same time, Daniela attended Coral Springs High School in Florida. As a sociable girl, she easily made friends with many people. Initially, she was close to fellow students who were also immigrants, as they had much in common. After that, she made friends with many others. It seemed that everything was going well. Isabel quickly paid off her debt to her neighbors. She even started considering renting her own apartment to avoid burdening her sisters. She took her time to save more money and regain her stability. She successfully carried out her plans. Her small business grew and began generating income. She worked hard, and her efforts paid off. During this time, she met Shu, a Colombian with 2 children. They quickly understood each other because they had both gone through hardships after moving to the United States. Besides, Isabel also learned about the culture of a new country, expanded her business, and increased her knowledge. Isabel and Daniela often did everything together and supported each other. Isabel credits their close relationship as one of the key factors in her success. Daniela is a sociable, kind girl and makes friends easily, which helps her have no trouble living in the United States. However, She was concerned about gaining weight during her teenage years. Instead of giving up, she was determined to overcome her problems. She started exercising and living a healthy lifestyle, avoiding fast food. These daily habits helped her achieve her ideal figure. Daniela's achievements inspired Isabel, and she decided to join a sports club near their home in Coral Springs. By that time, Daniela had been attending the club for a while. Seeing her daughter's perfect figure, Isabel also wanted to take better care of herself. However, she was very busy with her business, which took a lot of energy. After a few months, she was so tired that she refused to go to the gym. She plans to return to the gym later, but for now, she decided to prioritize her business. Daniela, on the other hand, decided to continue training. She was very happy with the changes in her body and figure that she had achieved. Even though her mother didn't go to practice with her, she had enough friends in the club to train with during most sessions. One of them was Carolina Miller, a 40-year-old woman whom Daniela met during training. They quickly found harmony and started training together in 2017. Despite facing challenges like migration and a language barrier, Daniela graduated from high school, proving that she could overcome difficulties and was ready to fight for her future. Furthermore, she wants to pursue higher education, but she needs financial support. Her mother's business wasn't enough to cover her college expenses, so she took a job as a switchboard operator at a gym, where she trained for many years. At the same time, she also learned about criminology, a field she was very passionate about and dreamed of building a career in. By 2019, at the age of 21, she was able to become independent. She was in her prime and busy planning for the future. Daniela enrolled at a local university to pursue her education and achieve her dreams. She transformed from a shy schoolgirl into a confident young woman. She was not only attractive and charming, but also passionate about her job at the fitness club. Her enthusiasm caught the attention of the owners of the sports complex, and they offered her a position in the gym. She became a coach, encouraging people to participate in sports and supporting beginners. Her main goal was to inspire others, and she worked with many different groups, sharing her passion. She also organized weekly group activities to promote teamwork and camaraderie within the sports organization. Daniela then met Yvonne Serrano, a woman of Panamanian descent. An active individual, Yvonne enjoyed sports and had never experienced any legal or substance abuse problems. She was generally considered a respectable person and avoided dangerous relationships. However, she lived in a troubled neighborhood, so she purchased several registered firearms for self-defense. By 2019, Yvonne decided to invest more in sports and joined inspirational classes taught by Daniela. However, due to frequent travel and the difficulty of making friends, she felt different from the other participants. Although she seemed unapproachable and a bit withdrawn, she always attended all the classes and was determined to change her life. On the evening of November 22, 2019, Daniela and her group planned to go to the movies and then return home. However, they decided to change their plans and go to a local bar called World of Bear in Coconut Creek after the screening. Since Daniela had work to finish the next day, she did not want to stay at the bar for long. During the night, she called her mother, Isabel, several times. Isabel was worried about her daughter going to the bar because she thought it was unsafe. Daniela reassured her mother that she would not be drinking and would only stay for a short time, planning to return home around 1 a.m. The group eventually met at the bar in hopes of having a fun evening. After some time, Daniela's friend Carolina approached Yvonne and advised her that she had had too much to drink. Yvonne was sitting outside, holding hands with some strange young men. Carolina suggested that Yvonne join the group inside the bar, but this made her uncomfortable, and she became angry and shouted. When she returned inside, her behavior became more aggressive, and it was obvious she was intoxicated. Despite this, the evening was still going well, and Daniela lost track of time. Later that night, Daniela's mother, Isabel, sent her daughter a text message, expressing her concerns about potential dangers. Daniela replied that she would be home early. As the team leader, Daniela needs to oversee everything and make sure everyone gets home safely. Sensing that something was off, Isabel decided to wait for her daughter. She lay in bed, unable to sleep, waiting for Daniela to return. By 2 a.m., Daniela still had not come back from the bar, and Isabel's worry grew. Each time she saw car headlights outside, she got up to check, hoping to see Daniela in the driveway, but the cars just drove by. She texted her daughter again but received no reply. Realizing it was too late to call Daniela's friends, she tried to reassure herself that her daughter was likely with a friend. She thought about the possible reasons why the girl was quiet. The phone was out of battery or the signal was bad, and finally convinced herself that everything was fine, then went to sleep. At 5:55 a.m., County Emergency Services received a distressing call. A woman reported seeing a lifeless girl in a parked car near her home. Several police officers quickly arrived at the scene and cordoned off the area. They spoke with the witness, a 51-year-old named Yvonne Serrano. Meanwhile, at 6 a.m., Isabel woke up and noticed that Daniela had not yet returned home. She felt exhausted, having only slept for 3 to 4 hours, but she needed to prepare for work and clean the offices. Unable to reach Daniela, she called Carolina, hoping that her daughter had arrived at Carolina's house and was still asleep. However, Carolina replied that she did not know where Daniela was. She felt confident that Daniela would make it home safely, even if she had been drinking, because there were plenty of people nearby with cars who could help. However, Carolina can't stop thinking about the incident with Yvonne at the bar and wonders if it has anything to do with the current situation. To find out more about what happened after she left, she called her friends from the gym. She was shocked to learn that her group of friends had returned home and that no one knew anything about Daniela. Feeling guilty for leaving Daniela, Carolina decided to go to the police to report her missing. The officer on duty informed her that Daniela had already been found. At that moment, several police officers were at Isabel's house delivering the devastating news of her daughter's death. They spoke with Isabel to gather important details for the investigation. It was difficult to calm Isabel when she heard the news. She began to cry loudly and asked what had happened. Daniela was her only daughter, and in that moment, her world fell apart. Police then carefully inspected the girl's car that Yvonne reported, which was found near Isabel's house. Inside the vehicle, they discovered an ID card and a bag containing personal items. By checking the license plates, they identified the car's owner as 20-year-old Daniela Tabares, who was found deceased inside the car. During her initial meeting with the police, Yvonne claimed she was on her way to the gym early that morning when she stumbled upon the car. She stated that she did not know Daniela. The officers then inquired about Yvonne's whereabouts the previous evening. She admitted that she had attended a party and had drunk excessively, even losing consciousness at the bar. She said that she had only woken up in the morning, lying in bed with no memory of the night, including how she had gotten home. Afterward, the police continued to analyze the evidence found in the car, but soon realized they needed more details. It was clear that Yvonne knew Daniela, prompting detectives to return to her for additional information. Unexpectedly, Yvonne's story changed. She now claimed that at 5:50 a.m., she woke up in the passenger seat of the car, next to Daniela, and saw her lifeless body in the driver's seat. Shocked by the discovery, Yvonne immediately called the police, admitting that she had previously lied for fear of being considered a suspect. The situation was devastating for everyone who knew Daniela, particularly her mother, Isabel. The Latin American community rallied together to raise funds for Isabel, and many local residents joined in to support her. Meanwhile, the police were conducting an investigation, which quickly indicated that Daniela had been murdered. Forensic experts discovered shell casings inside her car and collected several fingerprints from both the inside and outside of the vehicle for analysis. They were also awaiting the results of Daniela's autopsy, which would provide further insights. Police then began interviewing individuals who had been with Daniela that evening and collected CCTV footage from the bar where they had gathered. It was confirmed that Daniela had not had any conflicts. The night had gone smoothly. However, multiple witnesses reported that Yvonne had been drinking heavily and was very attached to the group at the bar. In contrast, Daniela chose not to drink that night to avoid any issues. A girl offered to drive her home, and Daniela accepted. Their movements were tracked to the parking lot exit at 1:30 a.m., where they left the nightclub calmly, as confirmed by the last person to see Daniela alive. The preliminary report from the medical examiner indicated that the death occurred around 2 a.m., which was the exact time when Yvonne left the bar to go home. By then, Yvonne had already become the main suspect in the murder. The police wanted to find out what she had been doing for the 4 hours before she reported the incident to them. They then found that she had been busy. She had deleted messages from her phone with Daniela, deleted the video from the front door camera, and changed clothes. She had also washed the outfit she had worn that night at the bar. It was clear that she was trying to cover up evidence of the crime. The police decided to arrest Yvonne Serrano and hold her in jail while they investigated further. Once the final results of the forensic examination were in, she was charged with first-degree murder and tampering with evidence. Despite the accusations, Yvonne has maintained her innocence and stood her ground. On November 27, 2019, Daniela Tabare's funeral took place, attended by many people, including club members, friends, and family. All were deeply saddened by this tragedy. She was cremated in December. A few weeks after the crime, the district attorney's office decided to pursue lesser charges against Yvonne. It was believed that proving premeditation would be challenging, so the charge was classified as unintentional murder, which could result in a maximum of 30 years in prison. She could potentially receive bail before the hearing and be released by the Supreme Court, which upset Daniela's mother. Following these developments, progress on the case stalled for unclear reasons. By March 2020, Daniela's family became aware that the case was not receiving adequate investigation. There was limited evidence, and Yvonne might avoid punishment altogether. Friends and family organized social media campaigns and protests to raise public and media awareness of Daniela's death. They want Yvonne to be held accountable for her actions. One such protest occurred on March 4, when Daniela's colleagues left the gym and marched to the court where the preliminary hearing was being held. They argued that Yvonne should not be granted bail during these proceedings. The prosecutor's office believes that she has a high possibility of absconding, so she is not allowed to go free while waiting for the next hearing. The lawyer requested that the judge set a low bail amount, no more than $40,000, arguing that if Yvonne wore an ankle monitor, she would not be able to flee, and claimed that the prosecution had exaggerated the situation. Additionally, Yvonne would participate in a rehabilitation program and undergo a mental health assessment. Ultimately, the judge decided on a bail amount of $100,000, which was higher than the initial request before the trial took place. Yvonne must remain at a specialized rehabilitation center and is only allowed to leave to meet with her legal team. Yvonne later underwent a ballistics test, which confirmed that the bullet came from her weapon. Additionally, authorities gathered credible evidence showing attempts to destroy evidence after the crime, and she was captured on CCTV by neighbors. This information prompted the prosecutor's office to pursue charges of premeditated assault and murder. It was believed that an argument broke out between Yvonne and Daniela while they were in the car, leading to Yvonne's aggressive behavior. The prosecution successfully persuaded the jury, and on August 12, 2024, 56-year-old Yvonne Serrano was found guilty of premeditated murder. She received a life sentence with the possibility of parole in 25 years. Isabel had a tattoo inked on her shoulder in memory of her daughter, Daniela. as a reminder of her fight for justice. Unfortunately, the exact incident between Yvonne and Daniela in the car that night remain unclear. She has not admitted to the crime and has not explained her reasons for her actions.